So what I want to do in tonight's video is to take you back to an idyllic time in my youth and kind of recreate the experiences that I had and hopefully share them with you, get that sense of being around the campfire with friends and telling stories, having a few drinks maybe, and just enjoying the ambience. This is something I did so many times when I was young in my teenage years, and it really was such an important part of growing up. So I'm going to try and recreate that experience for you all tonight. And I hope you're going to join me, and I hope you're going to love the times we're going to have together over the next few hours. Well, in the mood? I hope so, because I've got some incredible stories lined up for you, and I know you're going to love them all. So why don't you all come and join me around the campfire? Because I've got some stories to tell you, and they go something like this.
Great Auntie Madsen by T.J. Lee. For as long as I'd known, there'd always been a Great Auntie Madsen. She's always someone you needed to fear. And my family's always been good at keeping secrets. Some of them were small and mundane, the kind that any family does to spare their loved ones' feelings when it comes to a completed art project, a kind gesture or a false compliment. Some families have those bigger secrets, the taboo ones that nobody talks about. A family member who committed a horrible crime, a tragedy, or something horrible that binds the family together in a way outsiders can never understand. For us, that was Great Auntie Madsen. Well, supposedly my great-uncle Zephaniah had been in love with a local girl. His family forbade it under the guise that her family was of suspicion and stooped in heinous activity. But Zephaniah would not be deterred. Well, their love grew, and she eventually fell pregnant. She became very cautious, knowing how the family would react, and stipulated he must only see her in a certain location at certain times, a place in the woods nearby Zephaniah's, a spot where they could build a life together, perhaps. But someone in the family discovered the secret and forced Zephaniah, under duress, to lead them to where the lovers met. When he only led them part way in, revealing he had a baby with the woman, he was shot by his father, my great-great-grandfather, Obadiah, in a fit of rage. Upon hearing the gunshot, the woman let out a blood-curdling scream through the woods, declaring a curse on the whole Monroe family. Then, in front of Obadiah and his cohorts, she set herself on fire, baby in her arms. From that day forward, upon the encroaching end of every Monroe family man, a woman hidden behind a black veil would appear and weep around the home. If they didn't resist, they would die of natural causes regardless of their age. Naturally, there have been many members of the family who disobeyed that and tried to look at her. Some even succeeded, I'm told. But all met a terrible end. Great Uncle Ford called her the veiled skank, who cost his brother his life, and spat on her when she first came to the property and began weeping by his bedside. He was found several days later mauled by a bear, his genitals torn to shreds and his face practically peeled off from the top down as if he'd been scalped. After Ford's funeral, Great-Grandma Agnes tried dousing her with a bucket of holy water, calling her Satan's little bitch, and telling her that Jesus ruled her home. Evidently he didn't. She later took herself to the top of the property, stood out on the roof, and hurled herself from it and onto the roof of the well below, her spine snapping in two and folding her inwards as her body plummeted into the well below. Obadiah said he could hear the weeping from the well constantly taunting him, but he learned from his errors and never sought to disrupt Madsen when she came to visit. He abided by her, gave her a room, and told the rest of the Monroe family to never bother her. When she came to his home in his advanced age, weeping and pointing a finger at him, he didn't resist. He just asked for forgiveness. So it went. Some people resisted, others accepted. Our family grew, and the secret was kept until it reached my generation. It was the summer of 1997 when I first met Great Auntie Madsen. Travis, sometimes she'll come to visit us. It's important you know that she's a little, different. My father would try to explain to a rambunctious 6-year-old me who was still not great at understanding the whole different thing. But there was a palpable fear in his eyes, that kind of instinctive terror that made you pay attention. The unmistakable sense that if your parents, the strongest people you knew, were scared, maybe you should be too. She'll never speak to you and never bother you, but, and this is important, son, you must never try to look at her or talk to her, understand? He had his hands on my shoulders, looking directly at me and making me nervous as I hastily nodded. Now don't ever look at her face, and don't make any contact with her. Just be polite and don't bother her, and it'll all be over quickly. She didn't turn up with a ton of luggage and a merry song in her heart, a scowl on her face with thunder clapping behind her, or any kind of grandiose introductions that TV and films had taught me to believe happened when a weird family member came to stay. No. Instead, she turned up at 2:30 in the morning when I'd gotten up to pee. I remember on the long walk back hearing the soft, unmistakable sound of a person sobbing. It was something you're hardwired to detect and immediately run towards. So naturally, even in my half-asleep state, I did just that. I picked up my pace from the bathroom and headed down the hallway to inspect the sound. It seemed to be echoing from our study. But as I ready to turn the corner for our stairs, I felt a strong grip on my forearm pull me back. I was about to scream when I saw it was my dad, wide-eyed and filled with fear as he put a finger to his lips, shaking his head firmly. It took me a few moments to catch my breath, but I nodded. He pointed sharply to my bedroom and I walked back, the weeping growing louder as I shut the door and pulled the covers over my head. Maybe it was the adrenaline wearing off, or that kind of level of fear where your body wears out quickly, but I passed out not too long after. It was the next morning when my parents sat me down and told me my cousin Grant, who lived a few blocks down the road, had been killed. They said it was a failed home invasion, but such is the way later in life, I'd come to find out the truth was far more gruesome. That night, a friend of Grant's had found his way into the property armed with a bunch of tools and evil intentions. He'd stopped taking his medication and believed he was possessed by the spirit of a Wendigo, destined to eat human flesh. He drugged, subdued, and tortured the entire family, but only Grant would be subjected to his cravings for flesh. When the police found the man hunched over my cousin's body, a piece of Grant's muscle was still dangling from his teeth as he screamed at them, lunging forward and into the path of a spray of bullets. At his funeral, Great Auntie Madsen stood in the back of the procession, weeping as his coffin was lowered into the ground. We don't know what he did to upset her, but we can assume he interfered somehow. For being a child, I just thought she was a weird relative, and did as I was told when it came to keeping the secret, knowing full well that I get punished if I revealed the strange occasional visitor to my home. And so it went on for over a decade. She would visit one of our homes, we would accommodate, and when we knew who was due to go, we paid our respects. Most of the time it went without major incident. Our family had grown in common sense as the years passed, and nobody wanted to die a horrific death. Well, that all changed when I was 19, and she came for my mother. It was a Saturday night, and we'd been watching B-movie sci-fi films, laughing at the bad CGI and the low-quality acting. Mom's laughter was infectious, filling the room way more than should be possible for such a small woman. She'd always kept herself in great shape, focused on her health, and raised me even while holding down a full-time job as a psychologist. Dad worked long hours, and she never missed a beat. She was a role model of mine. Seeing a pillar of strength crumble when Great Auntie Madsen walked into the living room, 6 foot tall, face hidden behind a thick black veil and her frame hunched over as she wept, pointing at my mum, it hurt more than words could justify. Her laughter faded, her already small body looked smaller, her eyes sank and she nodded, never breaking eye contact. I remember those next few moments as if they'd happened in slow motion. My father screaming to stop, my mother's look of pure terror as I flung myself forward and stood between her and this spectre trying to take her away from me. You cannot have her or my dad. You need to find another family member. I don't care who. I stood defiantly staring up at this towering figure, the black veil hiding an expression that I was sure was curled into malice. The smell of rot hit my nostrils, but I refused to back down. Mom turned me around and pulled me in for a hug so tight, I thought she'd break my back, her weeping into my shoulder matching that of great Auntie Madsen. "Oh, my sweet boy, I love you so much, but that's a choice I cannot let you make," she said between sobs, her hands digging into my back, desperate not to let go. "We all have our time, and you know what happens if we interfere with it, with her. Let this happen." I was about to protest when she pulled away, tears streaming down her face, and stared beyond me, towards something I was never meant to see. For some reason, maybe in response to my defiance or to send a message, great Auntie Madsen had lifted her veil. Mom's face twisted, and I saw something in her I'm unable to take from my mind even now, a decade later. Mind-destroying fear. Her eyes widened, pupils dilated, veins grew large on her temples, and her jaw slacked open to let out a scream that threatened to burst my eardrums as she pushed me out of harm's way. Dad shielded my eyes, and we looked away as the screaming continued. Great Auntie Madsen's sobbing turned into full-blown wails, as it accompanied my mum's suffering. It was a chorus of pain that I don't ever want to hear again as long as I live. After a few minutes, I could smell burning in the air, and despite my dad's insistence, I pulled away to look at where it was coming from. Standing there, hand in hand with Madsen, veil now in its rightful place, was my mother's steadily burning body. The flesh melting from her face, and chunks of it were falling to the ground in a slop, her screaming still continuing as she reached out a charred hand. "Don't ever resist," she screeched before the smoke filled the room, forcing us to leave the house in a stupor and call the fire department. A neighbor had to hold me back as I fought to get back into our home, screaming, "That's my mom! She's in there!" until my legs gave out and I sobbed. I remember looking over at Dad, his stoic stare never once breaking with the living room window. He knew she was in there, and he knew she would come back again one day for him, for us all. Years would pass, and eventually I would see more cousins taken by great Auntie Madsen's deft hand and guttural sobs. I moved out, keeping myself near my father, married and had children of my own, desperate to start a life separately from the Monroe curse. I told my wife of it when we got engaged, warning her of what awaited her, but I don't think she ever took me seriously. I don't blame her. Nobody would if it wasn't in front of them. But that brings us to the present day, to why I'm sat in my study and shaking in my mind on the brink of sanity. A few weeks ago I heard the familiar wailing outside of my home. At first I chalked it up to that of some drunk, homeless or mentally ill person. But when it persisted and woke up my children on more than one occasion, I began to worry it was her. I hadn't moved that far from my dad's place, so my instinct was that she'd come for him. I video called him and asked if he'd seen her, but he seemed detached when I tried to press him for a reply. "Travis, you need to keep a close eye on your family, not worrying about me," he said bluntly, emotionally detached from the conversation. I was confused and, to be truthful, a little upset. "What do you know that I don't, Dad? If they're at risk, I need you to tell me," I pressed. "Everyone in our family is at risk," he snapped, startling me. "That's what being a Monroe means. We're all at risk and we always will be." He sighed, calming himself down. "Oh, look, I'm sorry. I've just been worried about this happening. Your grandfather always told me we were fine if she came into the home and we accommodated." "Oh, honey, I'm just stepping outside for a sec, okay?" My wife called me from the hallway. I shouted back to let her know I'd heard before turning back to the call. "Well, she's been wandering the roads outside my home for the past few days, so that's why I was worried. It was only the third time in my life I'd seen my father look so pale." "What do you mean she's roaming outside? She doesn't do that, she just invites herself in," he said, stumbling over his words. You sure it's her? Could just be a stranger, someone who's not well.
I know it's her, Dad. We've spent enough time around her to know the difference. She just turns up and wails for a bit before going off. Well, I thought she was after you.
I paused, realizing how nonchalantly I was discussing what is, in actuality, a horrifying familial tradition.
Why would she do this?
Both of us stared for a moment before a horrifying realization hit us both at the same time.
I sprung from the desk as Dad ran outside and raced to our streets. But there was no time.
I got to my front door just in time to see my wife, who'd never fully absorbed the stories and believed them, walking determinedly towards Great Aunt Madsen and defiantly telling her to leave the property.
"You're scaring our kids, and I can't get a wink of sleep," she shouted authoritatively.
Well, my wife always had a temper. She was a former Marine and was fiercely protective of me and the kids.
"You need to leave, or I'll call the police. You got that?"
Madsen stretched out an arm, and I watched in horror as my wife pulled her over her shoulder and judo slammed her to the ground, the veil slipping as I screamed. My dad did the same as he turned the corner. My wife, my poor, wonderful, clueless wife, just stared as this creature snapped its body straight, rose up to its feet, and lifted the veil fully as I turned and shielded my eyes, grateful the kids were asleep and too young to get out of their rooms. What happened next is not something I'm mentally equipped to put down here or anywhere, but she's gone now. My amazing wife of 3 years and mother to my 2 children is gone. Police just put homicide on the report and said they'd be in touch, but I know they never will be. The boys keep asking where Mommy is, and I croakily answer, "Gone to stay with Great Auntie Madsen." Every time I do, I feel my soul die a little bit more inside. I sent the boys to stay with their grandpa this morning, giving them a manila envelope for them to open when they're both much older. In it are photos of us as a family, an apology letter to each of them and their inheritance, both monetary and familial. Great Auntie Madsen had stood at the front of my bed last night, her shoulders hunched up and her body as tall as ever, leaning over me, weeping just a few feet from my own face. I knew what it meant, and I was in no position to argue this time. Well, I've come to a realization that whatever Great Auntie Madsen is, whatever my family's past, present or future may define her to be, she is clever. She does not take disrespect lightly, and she knows how to hit you where it hurts. As I finish this up, I can hear her sobbing, increasing in its pain, nails gently scratching the door of my study, but I won't open them just yet. I need time to process. I don't even know how long I have once I greet her again, but I can guess. You see, she lifted her veil once I woke up, and I truly understood the depths of her cruelty, the need for her to send a message to the rest of my family, and why you must never disobey when she enters our home. Because the face looking back was my wife's, eyeless and muscles protruding beneath cracked skin, the mouth stuck in a perpetual, dislocated scream.
There you go with the first story. Now, of course, a big part of sitting around the campfire and sharing stories with friends is being able to relax as well. So, anybody want a drink? Got some beers in the cooler? We got some hot chocolate on the go as well, so whatever your pleasure, just let me know. Okay, everyone good? Right then, let's continue with our next story.
Dead Skin Masks by Corpse Child. So, really don't know what to say here other than I'm pretty sure I'm surrounded by dead people. No, I don't mean that I'm seeing ghosts or zombies or anything like that. I mean that I see them, their faces of people I know for a fact were dead, not walking around, perfectly well and alive. Am I the only one that's noticed it? Well, probably, considering I'm not seeing or hearing more people talking about this. Either that or I'm even deeper into some real shit than I realized. If that's the case, then I'll have to keep this relatively brief, and as soon as I finish writing this, I'll have to get going quickly. If I had to guess, this might have started with that commercial. It was for this new beauty care product called New Face, claiming to be able to instantly transform you into a whole new you. You know, standard fare. We can do what doctors and dermatologists can't pitch. Well, here's an excerpt from one of their earliest commercials. New face. By putting on a whole new skin. In only seconds, that's right, seconds, you can accomplish what would take plastic surgery hours, even days, to accomplish, at less than a fraction of the cost and less than half the pain. You can call and book an appointment with your cosmetologist today to get your brand new face. But hurry, supplies won't last long. Now, the commercial itself, at least back then, was nothing special. It's just some hyperactive yahoo spouting the product's praises, while a basic diagram of a person's face was on the screen, changing from before and after use. I personally thought nothing of it. I had no use for it, and I honestly didn't figure many others would either. I figured most would have looked at this and said, interesting, next. Obviously, though, since I'm here talking about this, that's not what happened. It was a slow rise, sure, but it made it, and eventually I was seeing a bunch of social media threads with the stuff. I remember not being able to open Facebook for a week and a half without seeing at least 3 or 4 of my friends posting about, hey, got my new face today, hashtag New Year, New Me, along with 20-something odd other random people's posts on it. Again, this was just back when it had come out, about 9 or 10 months ago now. I should also mention that it only seemed to be available in my city, Pine Brook, North Carolina. I tried at one point, out of sheer curiosity, to look to see just how widespread it was. Nowhere else seemed to offer the product, though. Not sure how much longer that's going to stay the case, which, if what I've seen is true, could be a real nightmare for us all. So yeah, it was quite a fad. The way they did it was remarkable. I will say, before I found out how they were pulling it off, I remember seeing a lot of speculation on Facebook and such, either asking if anyone knew what the secret was, or just straight up coming up with blown-out-of-the-ass theories, spouting a bunch of scientific jargon nobody, including themselves more than likely, understood. Anyway you sliced it, the results were there. People posting before and after pics were showing how, when they went in for the treatment or operation, they looked vastly different. Some were gaunt and had wrinkles, liver spots, and just generally looked exhausted or sickly. After they got it, though, they come out looking unrecognizable. They'd look younger and healthier, as opposed to the aforementioned elderly, homeless, or drug addict type of look that I described before. Soon, of course, I began seeing some of these people out and about on the streets. Some of them were people I kind of knew, people I used to remember seeing frequently out and about, either out shopping, grabbing chips and smokes from the 7-Eleven, or lounging around the bus stop just up the street from the Publix. All of them now had a new face. And they looked completely different, like they weren't even the same people anymore. A few of the ones I'd occasionally talk to, I'm not a very outgoing person, by the way, well, I had to ask who the hell they were. One time I asked a lady if she'd just blown into town here in the sticks from New York or something, being that hers made her look like a magazine model. Well, she laughed and said, "No, you goof, it's me, Christina, from the bar." I looked confused at her. "You know, the one you keep getting your Jaeger bombs from every Friday night, which you still have quite the tab racked up for, by the way." Sure enough, she was telling the truth. It was her voice, which I recognized from her sort of country girl accent, but it wasn't her face. Her face used to be kind of rounded, with a dimple showing every time she'd smile. Now her face was a bit more pointed at the chin, longer too. The skin around her face was a bit darker now as well, where it was a very light white color before. Well, it was different, all of it. Not necessarily bad, but definitely different. It was off. Sorry, I said, chuckling nervously. Well, I did have a bit of a thing for her, hence the Friday night bar trips. "I didn't recognize you. You look different." She chuckled again and told me she'd gotten a new face procedure done. It was painless and didn't need to use no funny gas or nothing. It was over before I knew it, and the best part, I only had to pay $150 for it. She winked and said, "So, what do you think?" "Well, it looks, I stumbled. I wasn't really sure what to say. Sure, she looked hot with the new look, though again, I thought she looked cute enough the way she was before. But something about it, I don't know. I guess just how different, how new, I guess you could say it looked on her, caused me to hesitate, freezing my tongue. Her face began to sink a little, noticing my hesitation. I had to think of something to say quickly to keep from hurting her feelings. Finally, I worked up the gumption to say, "Well, it looks different. Looks new." "Does that mean you like it?" she asked shyly. "Yeah, I mean, it's just so weird seeing you look so different. Not even recognizing you, you know." Her face fell again. "Oh," she said, disappointed. "Well, okay, see you Friday?" I chuckled just as awkwardly and answered that I wouldn't make it, having to work late that night. Well, it was an obvious lie, but I guess she picked up on the point. She just said she'd see me around before walking away. This wasn't exactly the only occasion like this, where friends and other people I knew weren't recognizable to me anymore, though it was the only time shit got embarrassing like that. Well, pretty soon it got to the point where I was basically the only one in town who I knew of that didn't get a new face. I couldn't have cared less for it, don't get me wrong, but I can't lie and say it didn't feel weird being the only one that wasn't walking around with a different-looking face. By that point, maybe a month later, commercials were more frequent for it. Now some were even featuring celebrity sponsorships, including famous actors. All of them claimed to have undergone the procedure. In other words, it's very much possible that the way you see some of these people look on TV isn't how they actually looked when they were born, if you get what I mean. And the worst part, I don't think they even know what it actually is they're wearing. I don't think any of them know. Only, of course, the people performing the surgery and, well, now, me. I know this is a lot, and I know they're after me now because of what I know and what I've seen. But others need to know. Others need to know because, like I said, the popularity of this thing is growing more and more. It scares the hell out of me, what I believe will happen soon if no one shares this. It was last Friday when it started to take a downward dive for me. By then, New Face had been on the scene for almost 7 months, with it seeming to only get more and more popular. I'd gotten used to, well, mostly gotten used to, seeing everyone looking completely different from what they had before. Again, I personally felt fine just the way I was, so why change it, even if it was only $150? But at the same time, who was I to judge? Other people want to dump their money into that shit, more power to them. Others, though, I noticed started looking at me weirdly. Some would ask me if I'd gotten one or when I was going to get one. When I told them my feelings about it, they'd look at me like I was telling them I'd turned down an offer to live in a mansion or something. It didn't bother me too much, but it was annoying. Because of this, I took to going out less and less during the day, besides work, instead deciding I'd just go out at night time. Given how small Pinebrook is, things were usually quiet come nightfall. And add the fact that it got nice and cool when the sun went down, and you had a nice place for a nighttime stroll. That is, until that Friday night when, during my weekly little bar hop I mentioned earlier, my buddy Nestor showed me a thing on his newsfeed about areas of local cemeteries being found exhumed, the bodies missing. No names had been listed as to exactly who the missing deceased were, as it was sort of this just in type deal. No time for any real investigation to have been launched yet. "Why do they do it, Don?" Nestor asked me, knocking back his 5th shot of Jack that night. "Oh, hell if I'd know," I replied, chuckling dryly. "Where'd that happen anyway?" He looked at the article on his phone for a moment. "Hey, hold on, man, look here." He held the phone up to me and pointed out a paragraph he'd highlighted. "Ain't that just ways up the road, midway out of Pinebrook?" I read the passage, and sure enough, he was right. The article read that, at around 9:45 the night before, the groundskeeper for Morning Gate Cemetery, which, like Nestor said, was just outside of town, reported to police that at least 7 plots had been dug up and the bodies were gone. Well, my eyes went wide at this. "How the hell?" I exclaimed. "I know, right?" Nesta added. Admittedly, while I was kind of spooked, I was curious more than anything else. Who and just how the hell did somebody dig up and make off with 7 bodies without anyone knowing? Of course, the bigger and more frightening question pushed this one to the back of my mind. Why? What was worse, though, was how this happened not too far from the bar, maybe 10 or 15 minutes walking distance. The thought of some creep out there, so close to home, snatching bodies for God only knew what, sent me into goosebumps. It was enough to make me risk my life that night, having Nesta drive me home despite being pretty buzzed, rather than walk home like he usually did. At least I won't run into some creep, I thought. Once I got home, ironically enough, I'd all but forgotten about the article. Everything was just fine. That was until noon the next day when Nesta sent me another link to a news article. It was a follow-up about another 3 bodies going missing from Morning Gate, including the groundskeeper himself. What the hell? I know, right? That was last night. While we were at the bar? Jesus Christ. Yeah, just before we left. You see what happened to the old buzzard running the place, right? Old man Granger? Yeah, says he's missing too. Missing? More like on the run, I'm almost willing to bet. What do you mean? Come on, think about it. You know as well as I do that place gets locked tighter than a damn high school locker come nightfall, right? Yeah. So? So that plus, unless you're freaking Spider-Man, good luck scaling the fence around the place. Means that Granger was the only person who'd have access to the grounds at nighttime. Well, I was stumped there. He had a point. The old man was the only one that could have accessed the grounds and the bodies. No one else, or at least it was highly unlikely at the time, could have gotten in. Okay, but why? Well, like you said, hell if I'd know. Well, it's not like old Granger was entirely your average Joe, you know. Once again, he had a point. I'd only interacted with the guy a handful of times before. While he wasn't mean or unfriendly, he was a little odd. Of course, he was pushing 68, even if he only looked like he was about 45 or 50. And he spends every night in a freaking graveyard watching over dead people. So can you really be surprised there? Well, that being said, I didn't figure him for the type to actually want to dig them up and steal them. But then, who else? What if it was him, though? Why'd he report it the other night to the authorities? You mean besides the fact he was cracking? Probably for the attention. Either that or to try and shift the blame, like he is now with his disappearance. Anyhow, it's karaoke night at the bar tonight. You in? I didn't reply. I was barely comfortable leaving my house during daylight, and now this. No, needless to say, that was it for my late-night excursions for a while. Especially if Nesta's theory about the old man was true, and again I couldn't exactly prove him wrong, and he really was out there, hiding somewhere. Then it was a good bet that that somewhere wasn't far from the cemetery. Well, that above everything else kept me tossing and turning that night, and the night after. I stayed holed up in my house both days straight, only opening the door for the pizza guy. I'd have stayed in Tuesday, too. Hell, I'd have likely never come out from my house again if I could. But unfortunately, body-snatching maniac on the loose wasn't quite a good enough excuse for me to miss shifts at work. Oh yes, in that vein, I luckily only worked the morning shifts, meaning I'd be off by no later than 4. Despite this, I was still skittish, constantly darting my eyes around everywhere, thinking I'd find him staring back at me. Well, this turned out to be a real pain, as it meant that I couldn't really focus. There were multiple instances where I'd fuck up and forget to give a customer the correct change. Finally, my lunch break rolled around, and I was able to at least get away from the register for a while. Once I'd punched the clock for lunch, I decided to grab a bag of Cheetos, a frosted honey bun, and a Dr. Pepper to munch on. Nothing like a little junk food to calm your nerves when you look out for a maniac, right? That was when I looked up and saw him. Right there, right in front of my freaking face on the other side of the shelf, where the chips were, was old man Granger himself. My eyes went wide, color draining from my face. Oh God, he's here. He's right here. What do I do? Every instinct told me to bolt for the phone and dial the police, but I just stood there, frozen. "Hey there, Donnie," he exclaimed excitedly in a voice that I was pretty sure wasn't Granger's. "We missed you last night at the bar. Yeah, you should have seen me up on the stage singing Sweet Child of Mine." He chuckled before asking how I'd been. Well, I still stood frozen. Now I was more confused than frightened. "Keith? Is that you?" He just barked an obnoxious laugh. "Hell, yeah, last I checked. At least I hope I didn't drink so much that I forgot who the hell I was." I continued staring stupidly at him. That's Keith, all right. Why does he look like Old Man Granger? How? "What's wrong? See a ghost or something?" he asked. "Oh, no, I just, didn't know what I was supposed to say. I didn't know it was you there. I thought it was, well, someone else." He cocked his eyebrow at me. "Well, I don't know how. Last I checked, there's only one me." "Yeah, but you look different. I didn't recognize you. You get a new face?" He barked out another laugh and said, "Oh, yeah, that. Yeah, I got this done last Wednesday. Connie was getting one, which, by the way, made her look better than she did back when she was 18. And she told me I should get one, too. Shit, couldn't beat the results or the price, even with a lifetime supply of Botox." "I see," I replied, anxiety flooding through my body. He told me that the one he got was a fresh sample. For some reason, this alarmed me. What does that mean?" "Well, from what the docs say, it's a fresh new one they sent in just the night before." My legs started shaking. Brand new. Just sent in, but then... "Oh, and, exactly when did you say you got this done?" I asked. A horrifying feeling was quickly worming its way up from my stomach, causing me to feel nauseous. "A couple of days ago, Saturday, I believe." He stroked his chin, the chin of Old Man Granger, and added, "I remember because I was excited to show up sporting the new look to the mag that night." Well, that did it. I quickly booked it to the bathroom, where I promptly emptied my stomach. By the time I was done, I was left feeling dizzy. Not only that, but now I was more scared than ever. Now I knew it wasn't Granger who was snatching the bodies from the cemetery, and that instilled an all-new fear into me. Now I didn't know who or what to expect. Then another thought occurred to me. Keith didn't even know that was Old Man Granger's face he was now wearing. That got me thinking about everyone else in town I saw, walking around with a new face. Was it the same for them? After just barely managing to finish my shift that day, I bolted home quicker than I ever had before, looking over my shoulder the entire time, and locked myself in the house. Once I was at least relatively certain no one was following me or able to break in if they were, I started looking again at the news link Nestor had sent me. As far as the case of the missing bodies from Morninggate Cemetery went, the police were still investigating, and still at a loss. I then decided, against all better judgment, to look into my haunting little hunch a little further. I started looking to see if any of the cemeteries close by had any sort of incidents. After about 5 minutes of searching, I found nothing for any graveyards closer to town than Morninggate. I should have stopped there, I know, and God knows I wish I had. Hell, I'd have been perfectly frickin' fine never being the wiser about any of this. But as it happened, I did dig further. I started looking for incidents in cemeteries farther than Morninggate. It took a bit of time, but I eventually found it. It's a small string of headlines from another town's news site that was listed as a series of posts on a tabloid website. It was titled, "Terror of the Dallas NC Body Snatchers," and it detailed a string of incidents where bodies in the cemeteries were found missing. Photos were posted of graves either left uncovered or sloppily recovered. The post stated that police investigated the cases for almost a year, even apprehending a few suspects. But each of them had airtight alibis that cleared them, and with no other leads, as well as little to basically no kind of concrete evidence to anyone else, They eventually had to pack it up and declare the cases cold. And, as you can imagine, no trace or leads were ever seen or heard about the missing bodies since. I felt sick to my stomach. Looking at the date of the last article, I realized that it was only about 1.5 years before the ads for New Face started cropping up here in town. I couldn't believe it. But there it was, clear as goddamn crystal. This product is made out of dead bodies. That was when an all-new wave of terror shook through me. Thinking again of what Keith said in the convenience store, I realized that whoever these sick, twisted fuckheads were, they weren't picky about how long the specimen had actually been dead before using it. Granger wasn't dead until they got to him. In other words, these people weren't limited to grave robbing for this. They were apparently killers as well. And that's why I have to leave. I spent the past few nights packing what I can and finding somewhere I can stay in the next town over. I've put in my 2 weeks' notice at the convenience store as well, even though, once I'm done with this, I'm going to be well on my way out of Pinebrook and not looking back. I'll just leave you with this. I don't know how much longer it'll be before New Face, or possibly some other fucked up byproduct made by whoever these psychos are, ends up expanding their market outside of Pinebrook. But it will. I just hope that when it does, I'll be far away and people will know. Also, I hope that no one sees my face again. I'm afraid there'll be a chance that when they find me, it might not actually be me wearing it.
Now, there's something very primal, very primitive about sitting around a fire. It takes us back to the early origins of humanity, when we first discovered how to create flames and get things to burn. Must have been an incredible feeling to experience that warmth for the first time, and to be able to do things such as cook food and heat water and everything. Wow. What an experience that must have been. And of course, that lives on in the backs of our minds, I'm sure. And it's why sitting around a campfire is such an incredible experience to us. So, anyway, I think it's time for another story, don't you? Okay then, here we go.
Copycat in the Trees by Corpse Child. Remember, don't let him out of your sight, Randy whispered in my ear. I had him in my sights, an 8-pointed buck. He looked at me, locking gaze with me straight through the scope of my rifle. Oh, darling. I won't, I whispered back. I leveled the barrel of Old Dollar at the deer's front, poised for a direct heart shot, good and clean. One shot and boom. It was venison for dinner. Oh, I could already taste it. Nah, you ain't going nowhere. My finger wrapped around the trigger. Right as I was about to claim my prize, however, the deer jerked its head off to the right towards the trees. It made its little mewling noise before turning tail and darting off into the woods. I fired the shot, but by that time it was too late. It was long gone, disappearing completely from sight. Son of a bitch, I thought. I sat back then, already feeling the shame of defeat. Me and Randy had been trying to find a game like that for months. Most of them, though, end up being older, wiser, knowing better than to be out in the open grazing like that. It was a particular hotspot for hunting, the best here in Greenview Pines, and they knew it. He shoots, he misses, folks, Randy jeered, chuckling. Adam, the dead-eye, stares destiny in the face and blinks. Yeah, I said, sighing and having a laugh at myself. I looked at him, opening the cooler and grabbing and cracking open an ice-cold Coors Light before taking a refreshing swig. Hey, want one? You know it, he replied eagerly before plopping down beside me and grabbing a Coors. Taking another swallow, I looked ahead where the deer had run off. Hey, I said, nudging Randy. What do you think it was that did it, huh? He looked at me, raising his eyebrow. That scared the buck off like that, I mean. What do you think it saw? He frowned, thinking for a moment, before shrugging and answering that he'd be damned if he knew. I mean, hell, you saw it, didn't you? That son of a bitch was mine. I had him. He downed a swallow of his beer, chuckling to himself. I glanced around at the trees behind us. I mean, you see anything out there? Hear anything? Don't look at me, he said. I was watching you the whole time. Hell, you got a closer look at the thing than I did. I could barely see it from this far out. You at least had the scope. I barked a laugh before gulping the last of my cords. I started patting my pockets for my pack of cigarettes. I started to panic a bit when I couldn't find them. Where are they? Oh, shit, I'll just bet my dumbass went and left them at the... Randy said, holding up a pack of Eagle Greens. I breathed a sigh of relief and took them. He laughed and remarked, no wonder you lost the buck. You can't even keep up with your damn cigarettes. I grinned, rolling my eyes while taking out a smoke and lighting up. I then sat back again, taking a nice long drag of it, savoring it. Nah, pal, I saw it. I squinted my eyes to the trees ahead. I saw it in its eyes. Well, you didn't see him. See his eyes? I mean, I had him. He was mine. Till something, somewhere, went and spooked him. I dragged again at my cigarette before turning to look at Randy. Think maybe he saw me? He shrugged. I don't know. Like you said, I ain't the one that saw him. That being said, I doubt it. He went nice and low to the ground, and we're at least a good 35-something-odd yards out from where it was standing. I frowned, taking another drag. What the hell did that sucker see? What made him run like that? I turned to him again. You sure you didn't see nothing? He shook his head. Hear nothing? Nah, buddy, I'm telling you. Ain't seen nothing, heard nothing, felt nothing. All I knew was 1 minute you're about to bag a nice prize, the next you miss the money shot and the damn thing's gone off in the woods. Well, shit, I conceded. I tried thinking again about what could have possibly gone wrong. If he didn't see me or hear me, then what happened? Randy gave me a hard clap on the back. Don't worry, there'll be another. I looked at him like he just told a bad joke. He laughed and said, Come on, give me a break. I'm trying to cheer you up somehow. Well, you'd rather I lie to you? Tell you it'll come back? Yeah, thanks, buddy, I answered, chuckling while flicking him the bird. He laughed and joked. I love you too, pal. For about half an hour after that, the two of us just rested there while the sun slowly started to set. Him downing all but 3 of the remaining Coors Lights while I smoked another cigarette. I felt Randy nudge me and point to one of the trees, signaling that he needed to drain the lizard. I nodded and went back to watching the sunset. Everything was calm, quiet, and relaxing. That was the beauty of Grandview Pine Sea. Everything just had this natural way of making you feel all nice and cozy while out in the wilderness. No internet, no cell service, nothing. You didn't need any of that, not in a place as beautiful, as peaceful, and as just plain alive as Grandview was. That's how it was for me anyways, just me in the calm, quiet wilderness. And despite this, for whatever reason, maybe because I was a bit of a sore loser when it came to this sort of thing. After all, there was a reason Randy nicknamed me the Deadeye, and it wasn't an accident. Well, I couldn't for the life of me stop thinking about that damn deer. What the hell happened? There was no way it saw me, and it couldn't have heard me right. Randy said so himself. So then what did it see? Flicking the rest of my cigarette out, I peered around to the trees behind me again. By this time the sun was pretty well gone, making seeing anything in the densely packed woods damn near impossible. Anything except for this weird shape, perched high in one of the trees right in front of me. I don't know how, but somehow, who or whatever this thing was able to stand out against the already darkened forest behind it. It was a weird shape. Sort of human, but not. I guess the best way I know how to describe it was that it sort of looked like a giant lumpy black blob. A speck that was perched on the branch with 4 little stubs that I guess you could call limbs. Sticking out the top of it was a single lump that I guess was supposed to be its head or something, with 2 large white holes that were bearing down on me, watching me. I squinted my eyes, moving to get a closer look. As I did this, I vaguely noticed it shift forward in my direction from its position on the branch. I rubbed my eyes. My eyes had to be playing tricks on me, I thought. But no, it was there. It was right in front of me, sitting in the tree. Then I saw the thing raise both of its little stubs to its face, rubbing its eyes. God, there's no way, I thought. Did that thing just copy me? I stood up. It raised up from its crouching position on the branch. My eyes widened. What the hell was this thing? What was it doing? I wasn't really scared or anything, sure, but I was confused as all hell. I looked over to the cooler at the remaining core's lights. For a second I thought I'd somehow maybe drunk too much, even though I was pretty sure I'd only had one. I looked back up to the trees to see it snap its own head back to face me. Hey, it did it again. I stood frozen. It stood frozen, staring back at me. I raised my right hand up and waved to it. It copied me, raising its right stub to wave back at me. Then I dropped my right hand and started waving the left. It copied that too. I began to get curious, wondering just how far I could go with this, just how well it could keep up the monkey see, monkey do routine. I started jumping up and down, and it started jumping as well on the branch. Then I decided to try doing jumping jacks. It copied that too, moving its stubs in the same motion. Then, not knowing what else to try, I decided to take my shirt off and start jumping around, shrieking and scratching my head like a monkey this time. Sure enough, to my shock, it copied me perfectly. And when I say perfectly, that's what I mean. It wasn't like the way a little kid mimics something they see grown-ups do or characters on TV. No, this thing copied me verbatim, shot for shot, and could do it at the exact same time I was. In other words, this thing was like my reflection in a mirror or something, except of course it looked nothing like me, or anybody or anything else for that matter. Odd, sure, but it was nothing too alarming, I guess. At least until I could hear it start shrieking too. It sounded just like how I did, distinguishable by the fact that my monkey noises usually sound rather hoarse instead of the high-pitched shrieking you usually hear. Now I was a little unsettled by this. Again, copying my movements was one thing, but perfectly mimicking my voice too. Something about that just wasn't sitting right with me. I didn't know what to do. I felt like trying to move anymore was a bad idea. Like letting it mimic me anymore would give it some sort of knowledge or power or something. Well, I wasn't sure, but I got the idea stirring up in my head that that was why it was there. Is this thing trying to spy on me or something? I was still standing there, locked in this little staring contest, when Randy called out to me from the woods.
Hey, how'd you get back here so quick?
My eyes finally broke from the trees to look at him, confused. Huh? I asked.
Just a minute ago, you were right behind me. Figured you were taking a piss too. I turned around again, heading back, and couldn't see you no more.
He then eyed me up and down and asked what I was doing and why I was standing around bareback. I just looked at him, more than bewildered myself.
Randy, what the hell are you talking about?
I asked. He raised his eyebrow. It was pretty clear by then that neither of us knew what the heck was going on with the other.
I wasn't in the woods.
He gave me a skeptical look.
Well, then I really must have drunk one too many. But I swear God is my witness, I saw you in the woods just now.
I shook my head. I'm telling you, who or whatever you saw there wasn't me. He stared at me disbelievingly again for about half a minute before holding his hands up, conceding. He then sat back down while I stayed standing for a moment longer. Briefly, I chanced to peek back up the tree limb from earlier. The thing wasn't there anymore.
Wait, where'd it go?
squinted as hard as I could, first up at the branch, then inside the woods themselves. Nothing, just the dark, densely packed forest, quiet and empty. I started wondering again if I hadn't just been seeing things. I mean, I was pretty sure I'd seen it, heard it. One drink wouldn't have messed up my head all that much, I didn't think. But at the same time, I was also pretty sure there was nothing there before, nothing that could have scared off my deer. I was also pretty sure shit like whatever the hell was in that tree wasn't normal. What was that thing doing up there on the tree branch? That question caused my body to break out in a violent shiver. Looking into the woods, I felt like, despite seeing nothing there, something was staring back at me, watching me.
Hey, you okay there, pal?
Randy asked. Huh? I replied, snapping back to him. Oh, yeah, I'm okay.
You sure?
He asked, raising his eyebrow. Because you're looking like you saw Bigfoot sauntering around in the woods there. I rubbed my eyes and chuckled dryly. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just getting tired of something, you know. He snickered and reached into the cooler, pulling out one of the 3 remaining beers.
Here,
he said, popping it open and extending it to me. Take this. Maybe it'll take the edge off a bit, huh? I snickered and took the beer, downing a gulp. He was right. At the moment, at least, I felt able to relax a little again. I sat back down next to Randy, looking up at the now fully nighttime sky. Everything was nice and peaceful again. I made it through only about half my drink, when I ended up nodding off. I woke up a little later, needing to relieve myself, so I groggily shambled over to one of the trees. As I was doing this, though, I heard a noise coming from one of the trees off to the left of me. It, too, was the sound of someone peeing on the ground at the base of a tree. "Randy," I called out, still half asleep. "That you?" I peered around the tree I was peeing behind and instantly tensed up. There it was, that thing from the tree. Like before, it was somehow distinguishable, despite everything else already being extremely dark. It peered around the tree to face me, its large white eyes boring straight through me. I saw that both of its arm stubs were pointed down in between its leg stubs, looking like it too was taking a piss. What the hell are you?" I cried out to it. Still don't know why I did that. What good was that going to do me? I didn't know, but at the same time, I didn't know what else to do either. In any case, though, I will say that I ended up wishing I hadn't done that, because next thing I know, I heard the damn thing shout back to me, repeating what I'd just said using my voice. I started backpedaling toward the camp, and then mimicked this by taking steps of its own backwards. As it went, I watched it start to sort of twitch and wriggle, shifting. I then noticed that it started to change, transforming until it looked exactly like me. This made my heart stop mid-beat, my blood freezing almost solid. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, even just for the brief moment I saw it. That was me. It had turned into me. I was staring at myself. And this wasn't just some crap imitation either. No, this thing could have passed itself off as me in public with no problem. The thing was a picture-perfect carbon copy of me, every detail on my face and body, as well as my voice, apparently. Just before it disappeared completely from my view further back in the dense woods, I heard it shout back to me in a perfect impersonation. I had him. He was mine. Till something somewhere went and spooked him. As soon as it was gone, I turned and broke into a full-on sprint back to the clearing. Almost immediately I heard thumping footfalls coming in hot pursuit behind me. I didn't dare look back, afraid of what I'd see. I just kept running, but was not able to really see much of where I was going. Eventually I ended up tripping over what I imagined was a protruding root and face-planting onto the ground. I was out like a light almost instantly. I'll admit, I was almost shocked when I actually woke up again the next morning. I was sure I was done for, that thing having been so close on my heels. But sure enough, by God's grace, I was awake. I was alive. This relief soon changed into momentary embarrassment when I found that my clumsy ass hadn't tripped over a root at all, but instead the beer cooler. I had actually made it, yet because it was so dark, I was so focused on running for my life, I likely would have just kept on running right up into the morning, getting lost in the other stretch of woods. I actually found this kind of funny at the time, just the sheer irony of that situation. That would be just my damn luck, wouldn't it? I thought, snickering. I went to the overturned cooler for a beer, when I found all of them empty, having all been drunk. Well, now I was alarmed, well, more like aggravated. That little weasel. He knows better than to go on it. My thoughts froze. Then I actually looked over to Randy's spot, only to find no Randy. "Randy!" I shouted, cupping my hands around my mouth. "Hey, where are you? Come out so I can kick your ass for drinking my last 2 beers." This was met with only silence at first, and then from the distance, inside the woods, I heard Randy's voice shouting back. "Hey, don't look at me. I was watching you the whole time." I stood for a moment confused. What the hell? I called out again. "Randy!" I heard his voice shout back again, this time laughing. No wonder you lost the buck. You can't even keep up with your damn cigarettes." I started walking in the direction towards where I was hearing it come from. Randy's voice continued laughing. "Randy, hey, come on, cut it out, man. Where are you?" "Oh, come on, give me a break. I'm trying to cheer you up somehow. Why, rather I lie to you, tell you it'll come back?" I stopped again, frowning. Now, normally I'd have just figured he was screwing around with me as usual. Just another of his little pranks after busting his ass laughing after seeing me trip over the beer cooler in the dark while barreling out of the woods like a bat out of hell. But, something about this wasn't striking me as funny, besides the fact that all my beer was gone. Something felt off. Couldn't tell why at first, but it did. It felt wrong. I heard Randy's laughing again coming from the woods. It was him, his voice, his laugh. But at the same time, I was getting the horrible feeling that maybe it wasn't Randy out there. That got me thinking about the incident with me in the woods the previous night. That thing, the black, sherry, whatever it was able to sound just like me. Not only that, it was able to look like me too. And then it hit me. Didn't Randy say he saw me following him in the woods before that? I realized too that who or whatever was out there was only repeating back to me things Randy had said to me earlier. That was until I heard the voice scream, "What in the name of..." trailing off into a muffled scream. Despite my suspicion, I couldn't just stand there anymore. I know what you're probably thinking too. God, it's a trap. Yeah, but I just couldn't risk the fact that that might have actually been him, and now he was in some sort of danger. I broke into a sprint into the woods where I was hearing the muffled screams coming from. I started calling out for him. Randy, where are you?" I ran deeper and deeper into the woods. Despite it not even being past noon yet, the tight grouping of the trees all around me, something that's always been a distinct characteristic of the trails here in Grandview Pines, caused the area to get darker and darker the further I ran into them. "Randy! I stopped when I heard Randy's laughter again. Oddly, despite being in the same general vicinity as to where it had been coming from a minute ago, it still sounded distant. Or maybe a better way of describing it would be to say that it sounded less like he was actually there laughing, and more like I was hearing a recording of it. Like I said, I could tell the voice was his, but I could also tell it might not have been coming from him. I started throwing my head around frantically, trying to find either Randy or whatever his voice was coming out of. Eventually I looked up, and my blood instantly turned to solid ice. Above me, perched on a tree branch and staring down at me, was Randy. He abruptly stopped laughing and just stared at me blankly. I stood still, my heart pounding furiously, trying to punch straight through my chest. I didn't know whether to run or try calling out to him, or it, whatever. "Randy?" I asked, shuddering. His mouth opened, stretching a lot more than it should have, and he started laughing again and said, "Love you too, pal." My eyes went wide seeing this. I wanted to puke. That was his voice, his face, but I knew right then that it wasn't him. "What are you? What'd you do with Randy?" I started breathing heavily. Adrenaline was slowly filling my entire body. I could feel the urge to, at any moment, either charge up the tree at the thing, choking the life out of it and demanding to know where and what the hell it had done to Randy, or turn tail and run out of there, all the way back to my truck at the bottom of the mountain. I'd end up choosing the latter, when its mouth opened again, this time distending the jaw so far that Randy's cheeks began tearing apart. Then, from out of the mouth, I watched two inky black stubs begin prying the jaws further and further apart until I saw its lumpy head poke out and look at me with its white sockets. No sooner than I'd opened my mouth to scream than the thing shot out like a bullet at me from Randy's mouth. Randy's skin deflated like a balloon, draping limply over the branch. Through some miracle, hell, more like divine intervention, I actually managed to move out of the way before it could latch onto me, and I ran back towards the clearing. Like before, I heard it coming after me, right on my heels. Actually, this time I noticed it seemed a lot faster, seeming to stay a lot closer to me than last time. I managed to break the tree line when I felt something sharp sink into my shoulder blades. This caused me to drop to one knee, crying out in pain. I felt the thing then reach one of its arm stubs around and begin trying to pry my jaws apart. I tried in vain to force them off of me. It was no use. Its grip, despite having no fingers, was strong. My jaw strained from the tension. Thinking quickly, I drew my hunting knife from my pocket and swung it around, successfully embedding it into one of the thing's eyes. Sure enough, this caused it to let go, and I was able to get up and continue running. My pace was slower, though, with sharp pain shooting throughout my body from my shoulder blades. Fortunately, the thing must have been too weak to chase after me, because I didn't hear it or anything else coming up behind me. Despite this, I didn't stop until I'd made it down the mountain where I'd left the truck, parked at the opening of the trail we'd originally hiked to the clearing from. Well, this was 4 or 5 days ago now. I went to the doctor to have my back looked at immediately after leaving Grandview Pines. I wasn't sure what that thing used to stab me with, but I wasn't taking any chances that it hadn't infected me with some sort of venom or something. I remember the doctor's look of, "What the fuck?" when he saw my back. I'd had the same expression too when I saw them. Where my shoulder blades were now 2 large dark holes that looked like someone had taken a drill to my back. Even freakier was the fact that they didn't bleed. When he asked me what happened, I told him that a black bear attacked me and my friend on a hunting trip. I told him that it had gotten Randy, that I couldn't save him. This was the same story I gave the police and the rangers too the next day. As I write, they're still canvassing the mountain for his body. Well, I hope they find it. But more than that, I hope it's actually him they find. As for me, well, I've been at home. I felt awful since I left Grandview Pines. Those wounds on my back constantly burn, and I feel like the inside of me is sort of turning into jelly. I was up all through last night throwing up, and it hasn't got any better this morning. But that's not even the part that's scaring me now. The reason that I'm now writing this. See, it was just this morning when I tried to turn on the TV to take my mind off how sick I was feeling that the morning show came on. As they were talking, for whatever reason, I felt somehow forced to open my mouth and start repeating them. The worst part was, I was sounding just like them.
Now, of course, the ironic thing is that the campfire is such a beautiful setting that a lot of people who started out listening to this might be asleep by now. And if that's the case, then it's all good with me. A lot of people say that my voice is very relaxing and it helps them to get to sleep. And I really love that fact. So if you have any ideas about what kind of videos I could make that would help you do that specifically, hey, there's a comment section below this video, so why don't you drop me a line and let me know what you think. Anyway, for those of you who are still awake and listening, I think it's time for another story, don't you? Okay, then here we go with Havisham Redacted by E.B. Davis. There are seemingly countless sleepy little towns in rural America, practically invisible to all but the few hundred who call each of these towns home. Only 100 years ago or so, Americans used to live in these little villages, making a living as farmers. Society has changed so much and so fast that it's easy to forget that these towns exist. Unless perhaps if you're in an airplane flying at night, looking down at the window at tiny little clusters of lights, or perhaps randomly trawling through Google Earth in the idle chance that you might find something interesting. Havisham is one of those towns that's practically invisible. I won't mention which state it's in. Some of these towns should be forgotten, and Havisham is one of them. When it comes to the scenery, Havisham ranks among the best. It's nestled in a region of great natural beauty, though it's subtle instead of dramatic. It's ideal and idyllic farmland. It's the sort of region where photographers come to make postcards, or maybe famous computer desktop backgrounds. There are countless rolling, gentle hills. None are too high, but most are high enough to make you want to hike to the top and see what's on the other side. They're high enough to present a face to the setting sun, or rising for that matter. During the golden hours of dusk and dawn, they're particularly beautiful. In the early days, this farming town grew mostly wheat, though that industry was largely declined for a multitude of reasons. The land is now mostly owned and run by giant agricultural conglomerates, and they mostly grow grass for hay to feed beef cattle on ranches a few counties over. Still, those rolling hills are a sea of green in the spring and turn a white gold in late summer before the harvest. The hills, when viewed somewhere high, are spotted here and there like an Appaloosa with little forests of trees, usually oak and maple. Little cool babbling brooks meander in and out around the bases of the hills. Scientifically, the region is known for a special species of endemic butterfly, small and blue, and beneath this sod one can still find earthworms of unusual size. This works out well because those babbling brooks are also beloved by the fly fishing community, many members of which will gladly swap out a whole box of handmade flies for a few of those whoppers. The most notable resident of Havisham is Trevor Milton. Trevor's high watermark of local fame came to him when he was a teenager. Havisham High School, class of 1999. Improbably, Trevor didn't even play football. Football is king, they say, in rural America. If a teenage boy is going to become a small-town hero, he's usually a football player, usually a running back. But Havisham had never been big enough to need a large high school, and its football team was lucky during a good year if it could field both a varsity and a JV team. So nobody got too excited for the local Havisham Hawks, which was a good way to manage expectations. Trevor was one of those good kids, the overachieving kind you just tell is destined to do great things someday. You feel a little privileged to have met him in his youth. He had big dreams of being a big city journalist. His English teachers had said that he had a great natural talent for writing, and his words would just flow out onto the page like water. Trevor also had an Eagle Scout-like drive for public service. He was convinced that being a journalist would be a perfect way to use his natural writing talent to help people, to inform the public, the recording of unbiased facts, undying search for truth, and so on and so forth. Well, there was never going to be an opportunity for Trevor in Havisham. It actually had a bi-weekly paper, but it was barely more than a newsletter. It had one full-time employee, the editor, who probably should have retired years ago, and a nice lady who came in part-time to put together the classifieds. Still, when Trevor asked if they'd be interested in a voluntary unpaid intern, they didn't turn him down. He told them it was something that he could put on a college application someday, and they thought that as well. He was the sort of boy that ought to go to college, so he learned to set the classifieds and advertisements. He helped the old man proof, though not write, the obituaries. And after a while, they let him even write articles on Havisham Hawke's latest loss. Trevor had another interest, the real key to his local fame. In fact, Trevor didn't find it really all that interesting, just another useful tool that would help him be a good journalist someday. Everybody else's interest, though, was another story. Trevor was the first person in the whole town to hook his computer. Not many had computers, up to the internet. Many people in town had hardly heard of the thing, and had only vague understandings of what it was or what it could do someday. Well, to be fair, a lot of people all over the country were like that back in the time. Unless you were there, it's hard to imagine how the whole world changed over a few short years. What really cemented Trevor's place in local law is that he created the town's first official website. Really, it was just a project Trevor wanted to do because he was bored and couldn't think of anything else, and there was nobody else to do it. He mentioned it over dinner to his parents, who mentioned it to their co-workers. And by the next Sunday, everyone in town had heard that the Milton boy had created not only his own website, but now Havisham had its own place on the World Wide Web. What a marvel. The mayor invited him over to the city hall. That was a small, almost church-like building of historical provenance, built back when the town was still hopeful of growing into something bigger. Trevor helped the mayor and the city secretary hook up their new computer to get internet access for themselves. And the first place they went was www.havisham.com. After teaching the mayor how to use a mouse and how to click the hyperlinks, Trevor was lauded for his forward thinking and great technical skills. He was going to put Havisham on the map someday. The next issue of the town's paper had a picture of him on the front page, smiling with the mayor next to a boxy CRT computer monitor. Why, the young Milton boy was so smart, the article explained. He'd built his own computer at home just by ordering the parts. Down at the church, at the post office, the barber shop, the bar, the older residents would chatter to each other about that Milton boy and a website. Oh, imagine. They'd speak out all the wwws, the dots, and the com. They didn't know what it all meant, but the fact that it was a thing now amused them, and they laughed about it. Later on, Trevor would create websites for the 3 local schools, high and junior high, elementary and primary. He'd do the same thing for the parks department, covering the 2 parks they managed. The one in the city square and the one by the creek. Later on, he'd changed the URLs to the appropriate .govs and .edus, but the pages themselves still reflect that unique mid-late 90s web aesthetic. That fall, he'd ride into the town's tiny but appreciated apple pie parade. He'd ride with the mayor in his convertible behind the high school's little marching band and ahead of the horses. Trevor had his whole future ahead of him, and he was looking for something to do. In his junior year, he found his next big project. Be a way to tell Havisham's history to the outside world. Trevor was going to create an online registry for the dead who were buried in Havisham's little nearby cemetery. The Havisham Cemetery was a little under a half-mile west of town, obscured by one of the ubiquitous rolling hills. It was down what was now called Cemetery Drive, an unpaved road that had originally been intended to lead to other places. But, by circumstances, nobody had purchased more property down the road, nor built anything down that way, so it was renamed to fit its sole surviving purpose. The cemetery was built on the southern and eastern flank of the next hill over, with its eastern edge leading down almost to the bottom, where a large swift creek ran, covered on both banks by cottonwood trees. From the air it looked like a quarter circle with the apex cut out, or, as Trevor would say, a big macaroni. The entrance by the road was on the south side, and there was a big brick memorial arch, large enough to drive a car through. The arch had been built about 100 years previously, as had the surprisingly expansive wrought iron fence that surrounded the roughly trapezoidal cemetery grounds. The graveyard had a fine view of the natural scenery. The tombstones, gates, and fencing had an additive effect on the picturesque quality of the place. Only by happenstance, no professional photographer had ever found this place. Havisham might be famous for it if they had. Since nearly every resident of Havisham had at least some family member buried here, even if it were decades ago, it was common for them to make a trip out to lay some flowers. They appreciated that their loved ones had such a pleasant spot as their final resting place. That said, burials themselves were becoming increasingly rare. The cost of burials had become impractical, and more people were choosing the more economical option of cremation. It was thought that this was all just as well. There was only so much empty space in the Havisham cemetery anyway. At some point it would be full, and that was just as well too. Trevor Milton had planned to create a website for the cemetery. The site would include the names of those buried and short biographical sketches. People themselves, of course, were what made Havisham, and the cemetery had all gone the way back to the town's very founding. Trevor had the tiny newspaper archives to work with. There were the high school yearbooks, which went a long way back, though not all the way, and there were, of course, the elderly residents of Havisham, who'd be happy to sit with Trevor and talk about their memories. Yes, Trevor felt he had plenty of sources for his research. He could provide their names, the dates of birth, when or if they'd finished school, the jobs they'd taken, who they'd married, and who their children were. Then there was a decision that Trevor had to make concerning the cause of death. The old man at the paper had told him, secretly, that that was the reason most people read obituaries for. In most cases, Trevor decided to mention the cause of death if it was known and untimely. A fatal car accident might get mentioned, but a death from old age would not. Besides, the readers could infer the latter based on the dates of birth and death. Trevor learned a lot about the town from his project. There were common surnames here that he'd see over and over. There were the Browns, the Collins, the Hertzes, the Humphreys, and the Van Dykes. They'd all been old families with children and grandchildren. He learned all about the relationships of the current townsfolk that he'd never known existed. Like how the girl at school he had a crush on was a second cousin to his lab partner from chemistry class, or how the principal was the nephew of the part-time lady who did the classifieds. There had once been prominent families who'd gone extinct or moved away, like the Wilsons and the Llewellyns. Occasionally, even if rarely, new families would show up and become an integral part of the community, like the Gomez's back in the 1940s. He learned some things from the causes of death too. He'd expect to learn about men from the town who died in World War I or II, the ideas of which loomed large in his still developing knowledge of history. Instead, the town had only contributed a little over a dozen sons to the latter conflict. Only a fraction had seen combat, and all survived. One had lost a leg, but he still made it home. What he did notice were two trends that surprised him. The first was infant mortality, and how high it was well into the 20th century. Before, it had only been an abstract concept to him, but when he actually catalogued the children of the residents, how many children they'd had and how many they'd lost, it really did strike him. Infant also seemed to be a misnomer to him. 6, 7, and 8-year-olds had succumbed with terrible regularity, if not quite as often as the younger ones. He found numerous cases where a female member of a given family might be born, then grow up and give birth to 8, 9, or 10 children, only to have just 3 or 4 of them survive to adulthood. Cholera, typhoid, pneumonia, tuberculosis, nondescript fevers, they'd all been a terrible scourge. He wondered about the psychology of those poor people, how they could just accept things and go on with their lives. Based on the stories in the paper's archives, they seemed as happy and content as any people today. Oh, they must have had so much baggage. This would fade with more modern medicine, only to be replaced by a new scourge in the 50s and 60s. The number of traffic accidents shocked him. While there may have been laws against drinking and driving, it was still common and overlooked. The offenders weren't made public pariahs, and seatbelts weren't standard. Airbags didn't exist yet. When he looked at some of the old photos, he noticed a lot of the roads didn't even have the white lines painted on the sides. Traffic safety might as well not have existed. Trevor had never known anybody killed in a car accident, yet for a stretch in the late 50s through the early 60s, it seemed like at least one accident a year claimed the life or lives of local high school students, not to mention other residents of Sweetley. Like the generations earlier, people seemed to just strangely accept the problem, as if they had no choice. And this was simply the consequence of the times they lived in. Later, the accidents would diminish, as had the diseases. As the cost of burials rose, so declined the number of burials. For the last 20 or so years, most of the buried had died of old age or the diseases that accompanied it. They'd be buried in family plots that had been purchased decades previously. It was like the graveyard itself was succumbing to its own old age. Trevor eventually ran into a roadblock going in the other direction, cataloguing the oldest of the burials. These people had died before there was any school yearbook, archived obituary, or the living memory of the oldest residents. In some cases, they had surnames and could at least be associated with known families, but in other cases they didn't. Their gravestone had been so weathered and eroded that the names were invisible, though with some parchment paper and charcoal, Trevor could sometimes rub their names back into record. By fall of his senior year, Trevor had become more socially accepted by his peers. He'd been a bit of a pariah earlier, partly because of his strange nerdy hobbies and partly because of the way the grown-ups doted on him and not them. Yet by then, they'd all become internet savvy themselves and understood its virtues, and they'd gotten to know Trevor better too. They decided he was a pretty alright guy, despite his overachieving. One Friday night, a group of his friends showed up at the newspaper office, where Trevor had been given a desk where he did most of his work. Everybody else, both of them, had left hours earlier. Trevor's friends were asking him to relax and come out and hang out with them. He agreed, but he wanted to run up to the graveyard first and make a couple of rubbings. The evening looked pleasant, but the forecast called for the beginning of autumn rain soon, and he'd rather do it dry. The friends were amiable to this idea. It wasn't like they had any particular place to go. Most small towns don't. The point was to get away from adult supervision. A few minutes later, the group of teens were strolling through the Havisham Cemetery, 2 hills over from the town. Normally it'd be closed by now, and it was, but Trevor had been given a key by Jim, the man who mowed the grass here in the graveyard, also the 2 parks and the high school's playing fields. Trevor marched off straight away to the eastern uphill corner of the cemetery, where the earliest plots were, right up against the fence, to get his work over with. The others milled about, a little awestruck at how amazing the view was at dusk. Naturally, none of them had ever been to this place before, not this late anyway. It was while watching the ball travel through the air that they noticed the first bat. It had swooped up from the thick patch of trees at the base of the hill. Moments later, a piercing white light shone from the hilly horizon to the east. It took 2 minutes for the full pale moon to finish rising into the diminishing gap of clear sky between the cloud bank and the hills. And by then, the sky was filled with whirling and cartwheeling bats, out feasting on moths and mosquitoes. Trevor's friends had stopped throwing the ball around, partly out of concern for accidentally hitting a bat, and partly because they weren't having fun anymore. A cold wind blew from the west. It felt damp, and the air was tangibly getting ready to rain. A chill ran up their spines. It wasn't just from the cold air. Everything about their surroundings felt laden with ominous dread. None of them had ever felt anything quite like this before. They started slowly heading back out towards the entrance, where their pickup truck was parked. They looked to the north, hoping Trevor was done with his work so they could get out of this suddenly creepy cemetery. They noticed he was no longer making his rubbings and was rapidly descending the hill on the cemetery's northern border, looking like he was very busy. Trevor, for his part, had noticed the moonrise. He'd recognized that it was past time to leave and had stowed away his work in his backpack. Yet when he looked up, that is to say, looked from his backpack down to the base of the hill, his heart skipped a beat. A chill ran through his blood, and the cold wind hadn't touched him yet. Trevor saw something new that he hadn't seen before, something that probably shouldn't be. It concerned the fence. He was up the hill near the northern section, and his eyes followed the iron-wrought poles of the fence all the way down to the hill, just at the edge of the wooded creek bank, where it should have met the other section coming up from the south at a right angle. The fence almost reached the corner, but there was a break. The northern fence turned a sharp left and ran parallel to the other, then disappeared behind tall grass in the curve of the hill. Trevor descended at a good clip, A little dangerous if he hadn't been so youthful and fit. Still, the spear-like points of the eastern fence loomed up at him as he approached, and he swung his arms about for balance as he slid to a halt at the base of the cemetery. Sure enough, to his surprise, the fence lines didn't meet, and instead formed a curved passage around the hill heading north. If there had been a gate here, that would have made more sense. But it wasn't. It was simply a long continuation of the cemetery that somehow he'd never noticed before. Admittedly, he hadn't spent a whole lot of time in this one corner of the cemetery, but he still should have seen this. He took a look at the gravestone in the corner. Timothy Collins, 1919 to 1993. Sure enough, Trevor had been here before. He could remember writing up the man's description. Why hadn't he noticed the passage in the fence? The grass down the path had been mowed, presumably by Jim. Maybe he'd only mowed here recently. Maybe that path had been unmown earlier, and the tall grass had partially obscured the gap in the fencing. Trevor wondered what could be down the passage. Maybe just some maintenance area. Perhaps a tool shed where Jim had kept supplies. That almost made sense. The path was wide enough for a riding lawnmower, not a hearse, though. The grass of the path was a pale blue in the full moonlight. Perhaps that was the reason why Trevor noticed it now. The taller grass outside the fence was a darker grey. Maybe it stood out more in the moonlight. Trevor's curiosity got the better of him. He'd come to know the cemetery better than Jim, the mayor, or any of the old-timers in Havisham. It felt like it belonged to him, and he had to find out where this path led, despite him knowing that his friends wanted to leave. So Trevor walked the path. The trees to his right began to screen the moon, and only its light reflecting off the bottom of the cloud bank lit his way. But that was enough. The cottonwoods on the creek bank grew fairly straight, but they started to give way to oaks. Their large bendy limbs, heavy with moss, crossed the path over his head, a bit like giant grasping arthritic hands. If Trevor hadn't been surprised by his discovery of the path, he'd likely have been too spooked to explore. The open thick pasture just past the fence to his left buzzed with crickets, still out late for the season. To his right, in the creek, frogs were calling. He couldn't identify their species by sound, but there had to be at least 3 different kinds. They were as distinct as they were loud. Well above his head, a great horned owl hooted. It didn't startle him or make him jump. He was used to hearing the owls, and he even enjoyed them. Yet here, in this situation, it only made the goosebumps on his arm raise a little higher. The path zigged a little to the right, then back to the left, around what must have been the cemetery's hill. Then the fence to his left turned sharp, and Trevor's heart leaped into his throat. The space opening up before him was more of the cemetery, but he couldn't wrap his mind around it. Here were more gravestones, rising up a second hill. If anything, it seemed even larger than the one he'd known. The grass was even mowed, but Trevor was convinced that Jim never came here. He tried to make sense of it. The cemetery only had one big section, and yet here was a second. Trevor had known that cemeteries in the south used to be segregated, but that wasn't the case here. The town never had that sort of history or population. He was aware that many cemeteries had sections for Jewish burials, but again the town never had a large Jewish population, and he'd have expected stars of David on the stones. Trevor rushed up the hill to where the trees no longer cast their shadows, and there was enough moonlight to read by. He didn't recognize the names here. There were the usual patterns of family plots and more distant relations, but none of the living townsfolk shared these surnames. There were the Conyers, the Paynes, the Chapmans, the Atkinsons, the Skurlocks, the Beckers, and the Hesselings. The birth dates generally declined the further up the hill he rose, matching the pattern in other portions. In the 1940s, the 20s, the 1890s, the 1970s. Trevor paused here to catch his breath. These dates were becoming older than the stones in the previous section, and if this continued, it would soon be older than the founding of the town. Once he was ready, he resumed his ascent. It was already higher than the previous hill, and it only kept going far higher than he could have guessed at the base. The dark patches he assumed to be shrubs turned out to be trees. The pale blue rectangles that he'd earlier thought to be tombstones turned out to be whole tombs. He stopped again in front of one of them. It was large enough to hold an entire family. There was a large iron door with heavy riveted bars, keeping the dead secure. On each side were two massive vases filled with the dried remains of flowers. Both were made from what appeared to be fine marble, and so too was the tomb itself. This made no sense. This was the tomb of a wealthy family. Havisham never had any wealthy individuals, let alone wealthy families. Yet when Trevor looked at his surroundings, there were more tombs than tombstones. This looked like the sort of cemetery you'd find in a major East Coast metropolis. Oaks had been planted here, not naturally but as part of the landscaping. They towered over the tombs, and each must have been several hundred years old, from well before the town's founding. And what's more, the hill was so high this should have been viewable from the original portion of the cemetery. Hell, it should be visible from the town. Trevor's compulsion drove him up the hill once more. He paused one more time before reaching the crest. Here, gasping, he looked at the nearest stone. At the top was a crude bas relief of a skull. On either side sprouted angels' wings. The epithet read, "Here lies Prudence Goodwife, age 93, formerly lively, now dead as can be." Trevor was only a high school student, yet he knew enough about history to know this was impossible. The death's head, the rhyming couplets, the early modern puritanical name. This was the 17th century. This cemetery should not exist. Trevor moved on. When Trevor reached the top of the hill, the inescapable horror of his situation struck him like a brick. A part of the view he'd expected. Here was the usual rolling hill country, still picturesque even in the dying light. However, what was impossible was that they were all covered in tombstones, all the way off to the horizon. Tombstones and tombs, monuments and barrows, long barrows and round barrows. Trevor recognized those out of history books. Off in the distance were great mounts. There were ziggurats almost as high as the hills. There were pyramids, small, steeply sloped ones at first, and then giant squat ones off near the horizon. Then, way off in the distance, above the horizon, literally reaching up into the sky, there was... Trevor's friends had gone back to their pickup truck. There they'd waited impatiently. When they got impatient, they got back out and re-entered the cemetery, ready to drag Trevor out, kicking and screaming if they had to. They all jumped when, perhaps only 50 yards past the entrance gate, they heard the sound of rapidly approaching feet, and then the scream, "Run!" They looked up to see the black silhouette of Trevor approaching at full sprint, waving his arms wildly, and they all took off like a shot back to the truck. They all rushed into the cab and started it up. The driver instinctively moved his foot from the brake to the pedal and floored it for a fraction of a second, sending up a great rooster tail of dust and gravel, before slamming on the brake again to give Trevor enough time to make it. Trevor didn't bother with the cab and simply leaped into the bed, smacking the roof a couple of times and yelling, "Go! Go!" The driver, with no idea of what might be chasing them, again floored it and took off down the dirt road at an inappropriate speed. The pothole-rutted road caused such a vibration at this rate that it felt like the teeth would shake right out of their skulls. When the driver checked his rearview mirror, he saw Trevor bouncing around in the bed with a toolbox in the spare tire, so he slowed just a bit until they got to the pavement, where he floored it again. They didn't stop the truck until they got back through town, drove to the other side of town, into the parking lot of the gas station convenience store that served as the primary hangout spot for meeting up with other teens their age. When they poured out of the cab, they were all laughing and in good spirits. That had been a hell of a practical joke Trevor had pulled, they told him. He'd set them up good. When he'd come running out of the darkness, hollering like a banshee, they'd really become convinced that the devil was on his heels. They all agreed it was the best practical joke pulled in some time in Havisham. When other cars with other teens pulled up, they were all eager to tell the funny story. At first, They were a little annoyed at Trevor. He was trying to keep up the bit, long after they were onto him. His face was pale. He sounded distant, like he was trying to pretend he was still scared, and that it hadn't all been a joke. Finally, he came around. He started to laugh and smile and eventually admitted that it had been a joke. He told them that they shouldn't go back there, but who would? The joke was over. Later that night, Trevor would be the first to go home, a little early. His friends guessed he just wasn't feeling that well, which explained his odd behavior. Before actually going home, Trevor returned to the graveyard, put the lock back on the chain at the entrance. He returned the next morning after daylight. It was cold and raining heavily, so nobody was likely to visit soon, not even Jim. The pathway was still here. He didn't explore it again, though. He just wanted to confirm its nightmare existence. Trevor could never account for it. His personal theory, which he never told anybody, was that the path had opened because of his project. He'd recorded the dead here, and the dead from someplace else, well, they wanted to be recorded too. Trevor felt from deep down in his soul that that would be a very bad idea. Trevor never ended up going to college. The mayor, despite asking, had never sent off the letters of recommendation he'd written. Trevor had never even applied. It would have been difficult anyway. His grades fell off a cliff for the rest of his senior year. He was frequently truant. He even stopped hanging around with his friends. Never leave his parents' house. And as an adult, he would work remotely from his home, first as a web designer, then as a content creator, writing lists of inane things for popular websites. His classmates had all left town, going off to the big city, or at least bigger towns. Most of them would return to Havisham to visit their folks on the holidays. They'd find out that Trevor was still here and had never left. Oh well, they would think. That happens a lot. The kid you think is going to be a big deal when he's a teen just blossoms too early. They end up being a nobody in a backward little town, forgotten by the world. Oh, if only they'd known what a hero he really was. Trevor had taken over the groundskeeping duties from Jim when he'd retired. Now he held the only key to the lock. When the mayor retired, Trevor ran for that position unopposed. It was an unpaid position, mostly involving ceremonial things like riding in the parade and signing checks for the various city services. The residents of Havisham thought it was fitting for him. There was still a bit of civic pride left in the boy after all. His sole interest was that it would grant him the power that he needed to keep his secret hidden. He'd even hired a blacksmith a few towns over to build a few feet of wrought iron fencing based on a series of photos that he stuck at the entrance to that path to keep it hidden. Well, it's still there, of course. Trevor's the only one, though, as far as he knows, who knows of its existence. A little forgotten town, just past the main strip and down the dirt road. There's a path to the land of the dead. Some other sort of plane that wants to be a part of ours. Trevor has decided that must never happen. The dead need to stay out. That thing that reached up tall behind the horizon, that means that nobody must ever discover that path. He'd like to be able to just wipe Havisham off the map, but he hasn't got that kind of power. All he can do is hope that people forget. He has to spend his whole life, sacrifice his whole life. Well, then Trevor has decided that that's a small price to pay.
Well, I've brought you a very bizarre collection of stories this evening. And to tell you the truth, it's only going to get weirder and weirder as we go on. So for those of you who are still awake and enjoying this, well, lots more to come. Everybody okay for a drink? Some more beers in the cooler? Still got that hot chocolate on the go? Anything you desire. In fact, why don't we start roasting some marshmallows on the open flames? Sounds good, doesn't it? While we do that, why don't I tell you another story?
I search for things people are too scared to believe in, by Cole Blasek. To give you a quick summary of what it is that I do is kind of complicated. Well, I'm the person that goes searching for things that most people are too scared to believe in, whether they're willing to admit it or not. I've searched for Wendigos, Aswangs, Kikimora, and other things that I'm not sure of. I keep a whole journal filled with everything I've encountered, but nothing compares to the being that I recently encountered, the thing that made me take a step away for a bit. It started with a rumor I heard in a bar in the middle of nowhere. I'd stopped in right after a case of mine that had just ended, one involving a supposed Jersey Devil sighting, but well, that's for another time. The reason why I stopped, you may ask, is because the sign for the bar a few miles back kept blinking repeatedly, as if something was telling me to stop. The inside was a quaint place, almost like your typical old-fashioned movie bar, hustling and bustling, happening all around. One thing did stick out, though, a light dimming frequently around a couple of patrons. I made my way over and stopped nearby to hear what they were talking about. I only got a couple of words before I spoke to the man talking later that night. A shadowy figure. Once things had died down a bit, I decided to approach the man myself. "Hey man, I couldn't help but overhear you saying something about a shadowy figure." The man looked at me for a long time without saying a thing. To cut the silence, I spoke up once again. "Listen, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but this is the kind of stuff I look into. I'm an investigator of sorts. Here, take a look." I opened up my jacket and pulled out a compendium I'd been working on. Gently setting it on the table, I slid it to the man, saying, "Here, have a look for yourself." I then walked to the bartender, ordered 2 drinks, and walked back to the man, handing him one. He took it, looked up and said, "All right, I believe you. But I'm just going to tell you a few things." "Yeah, do you mind if I record?" He looked sheepishly and finally spoke up. "As long as you don't use my name or this place's name." "Works for me," I said, pulling out my audio recorder, loading in a new cassette. Audio transcript, case log 26. Name, John Doe. Location, not on file. "Okay, ready when you are." "Well, this creature, or whatever it is, it's not like anything here in this book. I know you got a few pages on shadow folk, but it's not like that. I mean, the thing was black. Just pure black." "Pure black? Not like a see-throughish black hole. Almost all black, man." "No, not at all like that. It was just black. Like nothing was there. It looked like an all-black cutout of a man. No features, nothing. Just darkness. Nothing I've ever seen before." "So you're saying that you came across something that was just pure black. Where'd you find it, and what did it do?" The man just sat there for a few minutes, looking down as if he was contemplating his next words. He looked terrified, and sweat started to appear on his brow. "Listen, man, if it's too hard to remember or think of, I get it." "No, it's not that. I remember everything. I wish I didn't. The things it did and the things it showed me were, well, I wouldn't wish it upon anyone, not even a stranger like you." "What do you mean? What did it do? Where can I find it?" You could tell the eagerness in my voice to learn more. "I won't tell you where it is, but let's just say I haven't been to this bar every day for the last few months." It told me things and showed me. God, the things it showed me. Everyone's dying. The world's on fire, and... The man's head fell into his hands and he began weeping, almost uncontrollably. "Oh, God damn it. Not again. I think it's time for you to leave," the bartender yelled from across the counter. Audio transcript, case log 26, over. After consoling the man and bringing him outside to wait for a taxi, he finally told me where it had all happened. It didn't take a lot of convincing, though. Well, for the safety of others, I will not disclose the location. I wasn't even sure if I'd find it. The place was interesting, and the drive was as well. The man's instructions were pretty clear. Drive here, turn at a tree. Turn, and boom. Well, it was a small, quaint town. Settlement? I don't know what to call it. It's kind of a small commune with 3 buildings, a post office, a bar, and a run-down church. But none of those was what I was after. A mile past the ghost town was a farm, or what was left of one. Collapsed barn, broken fences, and my target, the rundown house. The sun was setting as I finished my way down the long driveway. As I parked my truck, I got an unsettling feeling, and flashes of one of my cases came to mind. It concerned an old farmhouse like this. The family inside was all over the place, to say the least. Inside the living room was what seemed to be a man on his knees. But as I entered the room, it turned around, baring its teeth. It wasn't a man, but a Wechuga. And it charged at me, throwing me to the side and running out the door. I didn't see it again. But that family, well, what happened to them has always stuck with me. Seeing that made me contemplate leaving and saying, fuck this. But I needed to know what would drive a man to break down to that point. Cautiously, I walked up the steps, peering in the windows to make sure no one was inside. Thankfully, the place was empty. I turned on my flashlight and reached for the doorknob until I heard, "Don't," very quietly. I shot around to see nothing. Thinking it was all in my head, I turned the knob and went in. As soon as I entered the house, I fell. I fell for what seemed to be minutes, sliding down this pitch-black hole, screaming. I felt a hand grab and scratch at me. Their nails ripped and tore at my flesh, the warm blood running across my skin before finally hitting the ground. I awoke, sitting on a chair, waiting for my vision to come into focus. I could see something standing across from me. I was in what looked like a root cellar with a few lights barely on around the room. Trying to gain my composure, I finally heard something speak. "You came seeking answers, and now you are here." "Where are you?" "I am right in front of you." I looked up to see it, but I wasn't sure what it was. It wasn't just black, it was as if there was nothing there, just a cutout of a man standing in front of me. It was like the absence of light. No features or anything could be seen. The light from my flashlight didn't even appear on him. The dread resonating off of him made me want to scratch my eyes out and not feel it any more. I quickly pulled out my recorder and pressed record before the being finally spoke up once again. Audio transcript, case log 26. Name, entity. Location, cellar. "I am the absence of light, the absence of good. I am only darkness." "So, you're the devil?" "No, you fucking idiot. I am the embodiment of evil." "Well, sounds like the devil to me." The thing sighed. "Your Christian beliefs are not real. Every religion is wrong. When you die, there is no light, there is no heaven and no hell, only darkness. You become a part of me. Before there was anything, there was me. And when everything ends, I will be all that remains. You are an insignificant speck in the infinite, always dying universe. Let me show you." The being reached what seemed to be a hand at me, and I quickly scooted back, avoiding his grasp. "What if I don't want to see?" "That's a first. Every being or thing or person I've met has never rejected me, never rejected the truth. All those that have searched have never turned away." "How am I supposed to believe you? You could just be lying. I saw what you did to him. He was a mess after running into you. I mean, you did also say you're the embodiment of evil." "What's more evil? Lying to you about what's really out there, or showing you the truth of everything?" "But what is this so-called truth of yours? What will I see?" "What you see depends on who you are. Some see good things and some see bad. It depends on the person." "That doesn't really make sense." "Do you want to see or not?" "Fine. Fuck it. I'm in." Audio transcript, case log 26, end. With that, the being placed his hand on my head and the most immeasurable things happened. It was as though I was seeing the past, present and future all at once. The creation of everything, every universe, person and plant. Then, the destruction of it all. I've had 1,000 deaths and heard thousands of pleas. But I somehow focused on one thing. One of my first encounters with something. One of the dominoes that made the rest fall. It was Saturday, June 22nd, 1996. I was barely a boy, only 6 years old. My father just came home from work as my mum was finishing up supper. As we were eating, a loud screech came from outside, shattering the windows of our house. My father quickly got up and grabbed a knife before a beautiful woman with black hair stopped him. She wore a tattered dress, looked malnourished, and was covered in cuts. My father stood still, almost in a trance, and was unable to move. The woman inched closer, grabbing his head and turning it to the side. My mother was wailing and telling me to look away before the woman spoke. "I'm sorry you have to see this." With that, the woman got close to his ear, screaming in it as blood came out of his eyes and ears. Not only were my mum's ears bleeding, but so were my own. I passed out soon after and woke up in the hospital, only to be told I was an orphan. More flashes came and went, and I was soon in the deepest parts of what could only have been hell, feeling whips hit my back and creatures digging their nails deep into my calves and pulling down, only for it to reset and happen again and again, and then being nailed to a wall and all my nails pulled off. These were some sadistic fuckers, I thought, as the last nail got ripped off, only for them to all grow back again. I woke in my bed, gasping for air as I shot up. "Are you okay? What happened?" I heard my wife say while hugging me. "Just another nightmare. I think my medication's messing with me," I replied, getting up. "I'm going to go make some coffee and get a little work done. Go back to bed," I said before kissing her head and heading to the kitchen. It was 7 in the morning and the sun was just beginning to rise. I started with a pot of coffee and grabbed my laptop to do my annual reports that were due the following week. I was finally happy, living the life I wanted. It had taken years of therapy after my parents' death in that accident, but it was worth it. I finally had the woman of my dreams and 2 beautiful kids. Life was good. I awoke all of them to chocolate chip pancakes before going out and getting some groceries. While at the grocery store, I felt something watching me. But any time I looked around, there was nothing there. Until, finally, in the corner of my eye, I saw the silhouette of a person, almost like the cutout of a person. My head started ringing and my vision was getting blurry, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up gasping for air again. This time not waking my wife. And the worst thing was, I felt my body take control and grab a pillow. I could do anything but scream in my mind as the pillow was placed over her head and I watched her fight until she became limp. It happened over and over until I finally realized what was happening. I was punishing myself. I'd lost her long ago, but she's not dead. She just didn't want to be part of what I was doing. God, something was pulling my strings. I awake to flashes of lights and a hand gripping my head tighter in a forest. Slowly getting up, I notice that I'm clad in armor. Hearing screams, I look up and watch as a vicious beast tears apart people wearing both the same and different colors than me. A werewolf, but that's not possible. They've been extinct since the Dark Ages. And then I remember where I'm at and what I'm wearing. Fuck, I say as I look up and meet a hand of bloody claws right in my face. Falling down, I feel my jaw slack and see my ear on the ground. I feel the beast slash my Achilles before feeling its mouth close on the back of my neck. I wake up on the floor, panting for breath, not knowing what's happening or what reality I'm in. Audio transcript, case log 26. Name, entity. Location, cellar. Have you had enough? Are you now willing to accept that what you do is for nothing? Why is it for nothing, though? Because in all realities and timelines, you die a horrible death. You'll never live a happy life, only a life covered in darkness. Meeting me solidifies that. Caught ya. What did you say? If you were a being that was here at the beginning and the end, how do you know we'd meet? We will always meet. I've been guiding your hand this whole way. I've put all the pieces in motion. I am the one you meet before or after death. What don't you understand? How you supposedly know everything when you don't. Well then, I'll have to show you everything once more. For the first time, I could see facial features in the entity. Sunken-in eyes and a mouth full of sharp white teeth as it bore its hand towards me. It seemed ecstatic at the thought of torturing me more. But what it saw as torture, I saw as learning. Everything has a weakness, and I just need to find it. Try your best. Audio transcript, case log 26, end.
So what do you think about our friends around the campfire in these videos, eh? Interesting collection of folk, aren't they? Not the kind of people I was hanging out with in my youth, to be honest, but, well, it's all part of the fun, isn't it? You know what? They're waiting for another story just like you, so why don't you just get on with it now and deliver another excellent tale of terror? You all ready?
I exorcised a demon, and it followed me home. By Estelle Pope. The thing I love the most about specializing in exorcism is not so much the excitement or the thrill of the church, but the happy, smiling faces of my clients afterwards. Especially children. He was a spitting image of my little nephew, right down to the brown hair as flat as a river through a valley. He was lying as still as a stone, his hands limp by his sides, his face like death itself. For a moment his heart stopped, and mine did too. Each passing second was agony. Then his eyes flew open and his breathing stabilized. The color came slowly back to his cheeks. The boy sat up, coughing out blood. He wiped his mouth with a handkerchief. Then he smiled that rainbow smile that made my heart flutter inside, the smile that always makes this job so worthwhile. Thank you, Father Peter. The mother started to sob, her emotions gushing out of her like water from a dam. I squeezed her hand tight and whispered that everything was going to be all right. With a final smile, I grabbed my hat and started out of the door. Oh, wait! I turned to see the mother's eyes sparkling. Relief, gratitude. She struggled to get the words out. Father Peter, thank you so much. I smiled at her and tipped my hat. There isn't a problem, ma'am. She burst into tears again, and I could still hear her as I made my way down to the bus. I was still laughing, giddy with joy at another successful exorcism. But as the bus pulled away from the station and lumbered down the road, worry started to creep in, and my heart sank with dread. For my own little boy was not well. I had big dreams for my nephew. I was there when he was born, and I was there for his christening and baptism. I named him Peter, Peter the 10th, after me and my father and all the men that had come before me. I was hoping that he would follow me into the priesthood. I dreamed of the day I could teach him with my tips and tricks, the day he could successfully exorcise his first demon like a baby taking his first steps, and of the day I could finally tell him, "Oh, I'm so proud of you." But the house was too quiet as I slipped back home and hung up my hat. The sunlight slipped into the late afternoon, illuminating a long white arm that stretched across the hall. My sister, Maria, was frozen on the couch, staring listlessly at the television. The sound had dulled out to a babble that didn't matter anymore. I tiptoed up to my nephew's room where he lay. Only he was barely moving, and his face was the colour of weak tea. Shadows fluttered beneath closed eyelids. Sweat dribbled down his face and moistened his bedsheets. I lay a hand on his forehead, and it came away hot. "You'll get better, Junior," I whispered, lips trembling. "I swear he'll do everything he can to help you." Well, the empty promise hung in the air as I closed the door and went downstairs to sit with my sister. He would never get better. That was the fact I had to deal with, the fact my sister had to deal with, and the reality that hit us day after day as Junior got worse and worse. Money was running out. Time was running out. And we simply didn't know what to do. My sister gripped my hand, her knuckles white. She leaned against me like a house of cards, and she closed her eyes and went to sleep. Poor Maria. Tomorrow she'd wake up to another nightmare. I drifted off myself, my dreams plagued with worry. "Good morning, Mother. Good morning, Uncle." Maria screamed. I opened my eyes to a miracle. Junior was standing in front of us. He was wearing a freshly starched button-up shirt, black pants and a tie. He was standing straight like a soldier to attention, and he was smiling. It had been a long time since I'd seen him smile. "How are you feeling, Junior?" I gasped. "Oh, perfectly fine. Thank you so much for asking, Uncle." I clasped my nephew's hands into my own. Oh, it felt like grasping a cold fish, but his eyes shone like fire. "Oh, thank you, Lord," I whispered, tears in my eyes, "for healing my nephew. I will forever repay you with your kindness." My nephew shivered at my touch and squirmed in my grip. A look of worry crossed his face, but then it relaxed into a smile. "I'm glad I can make you happy, Uncle," he said. He insisted on sitting at the breakfast table with us. Usually he'd be fidgety, restless, before inhaling his food and rushing out the front door. Today he sat up straight at the breakfast table like an iron rod was shoved down his back. Maria set down a plate of sausages in front of him. Junior picked up his cutlery, cut the sausage into pieces, then nibbled into each one daintily with a fork. Well, my jaw dropped. For years we'd been struggling to teach him how to eat, but he'd improved by leaps and bounds overnight. After breakfast, Junior cleared the table and insisted on helping his mum with the dishes, so I retreated to my study. But when I opened my door, my heart stopped short. My study was a mess. My Bibles were ripped apart, shredded paper falling down to the ground like snow. The shelves had crumbled into wooden planks and were piled up like firewood. But what chilled me to the bone were the pentagrams, thousands of them drawn painstakingly all over my study, crawling up the walls and on the floor, over and over, a pattern almost like wallpaper. Each had a single 5-pointed star in the center. It was the color of blood. As I began to tidy up, I couldn't stop staring at these pentagrams. The 5-pointed crimson star seemed somehow familiar. I must have studied about it before, but it seemed to have slipped my memory. And to make it worse, all my notes on that star were gone, eaten by the looks of it. A cold breeze swept through the room then. I stared at the star again. And it clicked. Yeah, the house. Yesterday, I saw the same star on the walls of his house. And as if to confirm it all, cold laughter wafted through the room, making my hair stand on end. I clenched my fists until they turned white. I would not rest until that demon was gone. I swear on it. The laughter came again, this time from downstairs, and I burst into the kitchen to find nothing. Nothing but the head of a raccoon on the kitchen table. It was nearly severed, showing only the blood vessels jutting out. Its eyes rolled backwards, showing only the whites. As I watched, its whiskers quivered with fear before it became still again. Shadows danced behind the curtain. It was my sister, laughing, drinking something out of a wine glass. More blood seeped underneath the curtain as she refilled the glass. My hand went to my mouth. Junior was nowhere to be found. Images flashed into my mind of my young nephew on a tree somewhere, or on a wall, nailed down with his head dangling like that of the raccoon. I shivered. My heart leapt in my throat. My brain screamed at me to go find him. But I couldn't. I was stuck. I ripped open the curtain, cross at the ready, to find no one there. Well, she was gone as quickly as she'd appeared. Maria! My thoughts were going out of control. Tears welled into my eyes. I struggled to find what to say next. I'll find Junior. We'll do this together. The demon will not win. I fled. Didn't know how long I was in that study, but the daylight seemed to have vanished into a deep shade of gold. Shadows emerged and formed intricate patterns that crawled against the walls like the branches of a tree. Then the shadows fled to what looked like a huge spider, scuttling across the walls. I swung my light around, but it was gone. My wife was laughing. Whatever that was hissing. My head was spinning. Junior, I called out. I wanted to sound brave, but my voice was so small. I crept around the house. Junior. He wasn't in the study. Junior. He wasn't in the bedrooms. Junior. And he wasn't in the yard. It was still watching me, the thing. I could feel the way its gaze bore down on my back. I kept on hearing heavy breathing, a heart quivering with excitement. But when I turned around, yelling, bottle at the ready, it was gone. The treehouse was the last place I checked. Junior loved that place. Back before he was sick, he'd spend every waking moment there, rocking in his hammock, gazing at the blue sky and the clouds drifting lazily by, or spend his afternoons drawing with his crayons. Now the hammock swung with the wind, and the planks creaked under my footsteps like a haunted house. New drawings were on the walls, but it depicted the same symbol over and over, the 5-pointed crimson star. I forced myself to ignore the star, grit my teeth, and began to search. Hammock, rug, dusty corners. Again, hammock, rug, dusty corners. It began to get increasingly harder as the sun went down and the light began to fade, and so I carefully placed one of my purifying candles on the wooden table and moved to light it. But then I felt a whoosh of air, and then something heavy clubbed me in the head, and the candle clattered onto the floor. I turned around, and my heart, which had been thrashing in my chest like a wild animal from worry and paranoia, now came to a complete halt. Oh, she towered over me, 2 or 3 times my height. Her belly was swollen, stretched beyond the normal limit, and I could see red veins bulging from her arms that were as thick as tree trunks. She roared again, raised what I now recognized as an axe from the garage, and swung it down, only just missing my head. The table was cleanly split into half. I backed away, and she advanced, the axe swinging madly in her hands. At that same time, the last of the sun slipped onto her face, and I nearly dropped everything I was so desperately holding. Maria. But it was not the Maria I knew. Her eyes were bloodshot. She moved with an awkward clumsiness that didn't seem like herself. Far below the treehouse, I could see somebody waving their hands as if conducting a fancy orchestra. Somebody with the body shape and size of a huge spider. Somebody scuttling towards my direction. I had 10 seconds. Maria, I choked out. Please. She was almost on me now. She dropped the axe and her hands crawled up to my throat. Her breath was on my face. I squirmed, but I was trapped under her grip. Maria, I hissed. Fight it. She never will. The voice was too familiar, too small, too much like that same little boy who could brighten my day just by walking into the room. That same boy who was wolfing down sausages this very morning with a big grin on his face. Oh, no. Why, Uncle? Junior drawled. His eyes gleamed red in the twilight. The crimson star was carved onto his chest now, gleaming with blood. He raised both his arms, and Maria got off me and marched to his side. He advanced on me, his now forked tongue flicking from side to side. "Get out of my nephew," I howled. My palms were sweating. I scrambled onto my feet and forced myself to move. "Get out of him," Junior repeated mockingly. He cocked his head like he pretended not to understand, and then let out a large guffaw. "Oh, on the contrary, Uncle. I'll have the joy of finishing you off myself, for everything you've done to us." I set the candle back on its stand and lit it. My hands were shaking so badly I was afraid I might accidentally burn the treehouse down. The flame went out feebly. I struck another match. "It's not working. Give up and come to me, Uncle. It'll make things so much easier." "Oh, come on, come on." The flame was too weak. It went down slower and slower, and I bit my nails and held my breath. When it finally exploded into light, and the treehouse was bathed in orange and yellow and gold. Junior hissed in pain, and his eyes went wide. He backed quickly into the corner. It was time. I laid my right hand onto him and placed my cross on his forehead. Oh, Junior screamed. Smoke was coming out from where the cross met his skin. Then, before I even started to pray, he dissolved into a mound of black ash. More rained down from the roof, flooding the treehouse, spilling over onto the ground. I looked to my left and saw my sister was crumbling too. First her legs, then her belly, and then her head. Blood gushed out and baked the ash into something hard. I was left with the graves of the only family I'd ever known. I knelt in front of them and said a final goodbye, my tears falling like the ashes scattered around me. Then I wordlessly blew out the candle, climbed down the rope ladder, and looked at the shadow of the treehouse for the last time. Every step back to the main house was heavier than the last. I stared at the flickering flames of the candle as the night danced on around me. I scrolled through my phone, staring at pictures of my family, eating ice cream, playing at the beach, normal family stuff that made everything so worth it. Until my life was ruined by the same thing I swore to protect them from. My resolve hardened, and I made a promise right then and there that I would fight the demons that haunted this world and send them back to where they came from, that no one else would get hurt. And, as if God himself was listening, the phone rang. "Hello, is this Father Peter?" It was a young woman, early 20s, and her voice sounded strange. "My sister's here in my body, and I can't sleep anymore. Get her out so we can both be at peace. Please." "Oh, shut up, Cam. He can't help you. Besides, you know you deserve it." Then the line went dead. The lady, Cam, had sent an address. I gathered up my things and packed them into my knapsack. Yes, tonight will be a new night, a night of change. But as I strode down the road to take the first bus, I felt something wake up inside me. "Hello, Father Peter." I nearly dropped my things. I scanned the surroundings, my heart thumping away in my chest. Nothing. Yeah, maybe it was just the events of the night. Every little thing was making me jump. The sun began to rise, illuminating the silent forest around me. Yeah, there was nothing. Yet my heartbeat was quickening again. I couldn't help but look around as I climbed the steps of the bus. The voice gave out another hearty chuckle. Once again a shiver ran up my spine. My left hand was twitching involuntarily. "Well, I loved your nephew. And as for you... Right. Let's dance."
Well, let's just keep making sure that we're having a good time, everybody. I'm going to top up all your drinks. Everybody okay for beer? All those on the hot chocolate, you got enough? Wonderful. Everybody in the back, still awake? I see some of you asleep. Good. Okay, you're having a lovely evening around the campfire, and you don't have to stay awake for this. That's fine. But you know what? I'm not done yet. More stories to come. So here we go with the next one.
Heart of Stone by the Vespers Bell. The subduedly ornate and candlelit grand hall of Adderwood Manor was both abnormally quiet and unusually empty, for tonight was neither a festive celebration nor a general meeting for high-ranking Addermen. At the front of the hall sat all 12 arch-Addermen, 6 to each side of an unoccupied throne. Newest among them, to the confusion and resentment of many, was the portly and relatively good-natured Fenwick Humberton. His position was perhaps not surprising, since the Grand Council of Arch-Addermen were in practice merely as an advisory body with no authority other than what the Grand Adderman chose to delegate to them. They served at his pleasure, so a pleasing disposition went a long way to getting and keeping them where they were. Across from them, only a few of the hundreds of gleaming lacquered chairs held a guest, the most uneasy of which was Seneca Chamberlain. He was a disgraced former head Adderman, and now held the informal and somewhat honorary title of Elder Adderman, which was essentially any older or otherwise remarkable Adderman who was not the head of a chapter house. The 2 strange beings to either side of him shared this rank as well. To his right was the undead and eerily phosphorescent brain of Whittaker Crowley, suspended in a glass vat of bubbling preternatural fluids, mounted on a wheeled podium powered by psychically operated clockwork contraptions, and topped with a bowler hat. To his left was Drogo Raubritter, a pallid, slender, and hairless industrialist who shared Seneca's grandiose and outdated fashion sense of 3-piece suits and top hats. His keen-sighted but unsightly eyes were concealed behind a pair of shaded hexagonal spectacles, whose gaze was currently set upon a tumultuously dark orb perched upon the ebony cane clutched in his silk-gloved hands. Across the aisle from them, which was still far too close for comfort, were James and Mary Darling, twins, lovers, and supernatural sociopaths who lured their victims into their own pocket reality to torture, kill, and cannibalize. This was the first time they'd appeared at Adderwood Manor without an explicit summons, for the matter of today's discussion was one of great personal interest to them. It was so important to them that Mary hadn't had anything to drink since breakfast, something which terrified everyone present. She smoked incessantly with a shaking hand to try to calm her overactive nerves, sweat noticeably dripping down her face despite the chill of the room. On the floor between the council and the onlookers was the head of the Harrowick chapter, Ivy Noir, her sister Envy, and her de facto husband, Eric Thorne. All were prostrate before the council, knees and foreheads to the ground with hands bound behind their backs. The elongated body of the Grand Adderman slithered around them, his crimson cloak trailing behind him like a tail. He clutched a scepter of seely silver in his spidery fingers, its handle comprised of 3 intertwining serpents. Its head had once held an ancient and mystical crystal orb, but now it held only its midnight blue shards. Only the Grand Adderman and his inner circle knew for certain how the orb had been shattered. They were forbidden to speak of it to the rest of their order. Rumors ran rampant amongst the lower ranks as to how such a powerful and priceless artifact had been ruined, but none lightly guessed at the absurd truth.
"These repeated humiliations are beginning to weigh on me,"
came the Grand Adderman's raspy voice out of the near-lightless abyss of his hooded face.
"First, Emrys is summoned by Seneca, who promptly loses control of him. Emrys then not only manages to evade capture, but proceeds to start robbing us blind one by one. One particular theft managed to include one of the Darling twins' many corpses. That corpse then waltzed right into Pendragon Manor, despite its alleged technological and thaumaturgical impregnability, lied in wait in the Cuniculi chamber for head Adderman Noir, stole her Cuniculi keys, contaminated the many thousands of pounds of sigil sound held within, all before topping off her crime spree by devouring a sanguine egregore. Thorne, You claim that the only way Petra Stone could have circumvented your security system the way she did is with administrative access. Have you learned how she accomplished this?
No, Grand Adamant, Eric replied, not daring to move from his position until he was explicitly commanded to do so. After an extensive internal investigation, we found no evidence of an information breach. All passwords have been reset, new protocols have been implemented, and sensitive information is now more restricted. But without knowing how the breach was originally accomplished, we cannot guarantee it will not happen again.
And I assume you're equally as mystified as to how she managed to overcome the protective wards as well, Miss Noir?
The Grand Adamant asked.
Yes, Grand Adamant, Ivy replied. I did observe, however, during my brief opportunity that Petra appears to share Emrys's ability to remain incorporeal while out of direct light. Her ability to move unseen and undetected through shadows is likely how she was able to avoid setting off both the wards and the security system. The wards protecting Pendragon Manor were also not designed specifically with Emrys or his vassals in mind. Envy and I have devised new wards that we believe should be more effective, but they of course remain untested. Miss Noir, do you realize how valuable Petra Stone would have been to us, dead or alive, in our efforts to bring down Emrys? The Grand Adamant demanded, stooping down directly in front of her, his icy-cold breath beating down on the back of her head. Of course I do, Grand Adamant, she said through chattering, shivering teeth. And yet you let her escape with your set of cuniculi keys, no less, he reminded her, his raspy voice thick with vehemence. Why? I had to make sure Envy was safe, Grand Adamant, she confessed. Mary screamed in rage as she bolted up from her chair, tossing her cigarette aside and pulling out her favorite butcher's knife. She pounced upon Envy, pushing her face down into the floor with one hand as she raised her knife in the other. That was my corpse, she screamed. I killed her. I should have shut her out by now, but Emery stole her from us. You big-breasted bimbos had the chance to take her out, and you let her get away. Oh, I ought to cut this slut's heart out and eat it right in front of you, Ivy, so that you won't have the same excuse to screw up next time. Mary, let's ease up on the death threats and internalize misogyny for a tick and talk about this, Fenwick suggested as he leapt from his seat and crept towards her as quickly as he dared. Nobody but James had remained seated after Mary's outburst, either out of concern for the Noir sisters or their own lives. Even the Grand Adamant had been somewhat taken aback by Mary's audacity. Rowley and Rowbritter exchanged glances, Crowley nodding down to the small Tesla coil on his podium, then towards Mary. Rowbritter nodded, lifting his cane slightly and subtly gesturing towards James. Seneca, however, found himself paralyzed with indecision. As much as he wanted Ivy to suffer for replacing him as head of the Harrowick chapter, he was terrified that Mary could just as easily turn her rage on him for his summoning of Emrys. Mary, the Council is in agreement that the expertise of Ivy and Envy Noir are critical in our campaign against Emrys, Fenwick said in the most soothing tone he could manage. Envy was sobbing and quietly pleading for her life, with her sister feeling equally helpless to protect her. Ivy knew that if the Darlings wanted to kill you, you were already as good as dead. Want your revenge? We need them. It's as simple as that. You need Ivy. Her sister's just a little puppy dog, and you know it, Mary claimed. We need Ivy's full and willing cooperation, and that means we need Envy alive and well, Fenwick countered. Let her go. Mary didn't respond, nor did she retreat from her position. James, for God's sake, call her off, Fenwick demanded. Sorry, Fenny, but I'm afraid Mary only answers to me in matters that fall under my purview as the man of the house, James said smugly. When it comes to her choice of prey, she can be surprisingly independently minded. Mary did not release her prey, but neither did she bring her knife down upon her. Her atypical sobriety was almost certainly the one reason that Envy was still alive. Ordinarily, Mary did as she pleased with no concern for consequences, but now she was torn. Her blade, already drawn, was begging for the familiar taste of human flesh. But doubt, normally drowned out with alcohol, was gnawing at her. What if the council was right? What if she did need Ivy to get to Emrys? That she would be of no use if she was heartbroken over the death of her beloved sister. What would the Grand Adamant do if Mary cost him a critical asset in his quest to defeat Emrys? Mary looked up from her prey and into the shadowed face of the Grand Adamant, now looming over her like a cobra about to strike. With his frigid breath wafting into her face, Mary was, for the first time, able to catch a glimpse of his glinting eyes beneath his hood. What she saw in those eyes filled her with a fear she had not felt since Emrys had broken into their playroom and murdered their pet Voggerhaus in front of them.
Mary, darling, you're interrupting my interrogation,
the Grand Adamant said with a sinister yet lilting tone, pointing the ragged shards of his scepter towards her.
Return to your seat. Now.
Lowering her knife, Mary stumbled backwards, suddenly overcome by a need to get out of his reach.
Yes, of course, Grand Adamant. My apologies,
she muttered meekly. Her shaking now was much out of fear as it was from the alcohol withdrawal. She returned to her brother's side and practically collapsed into his protective embrace, while he glared down at the Grand Adamant as he fought to control his rage. For everyone else in the room, however, the sense of relief was palpable. Even the Grand Adamant let out a sigh, going so far as to give Envy a pitying pat on the head.
Rise, all of you,
he said as he telekinetically released their bindings before returning to his throne.
Would someone please get Mary a drink? A real drink. None of that high school wine you pretentious snobs think counts as booze, she barked at the attendant scurrying off to the galley. Fenric helped Envy to her knees, fussing over her as Ivy clutched her tightly to her chest and stroked her hair. Miss Noir, consider what just happened your penance for letting Petra escape, the Grand Adamant decreed. In fact, I have come to the conclusion that your strategy for using the sigil sand to catch Emrys may have been indeed our best chance of besting him. If he didn't consider it a threat, he wouldn't have gone to such lengths to sabotage it.
If I may, interject, Seneca interjected, regardless of whether or not he may. I think that incident with Petra is proof that we are pursuing a fundamentally flawed strategy in our pursuit of Emrys. It's well past time that we consider diplomacy as a viable alternative. I have maintained relations with the hedge witch Samantha Sumner, an individual whom Emrys briefly expressed an affinity for, and who would be willing to serve as an intermediary in negotiations. She has a vested interest in avoiding a massive occult conflict between Emrys and ourselves, and frankly, so should we.
And has the hedge witch actually had any contact with Emrys since our Halloween party?
The Grand Adamant demanded. Not as of yet, no. However...
Then I'm not interested,
the Grand Adamant said with a wave of his hand.
I want the sigil sand beneath Pendragon Hill purged of Emrys's taint. God knows what havoc that dark magic has already wrought. Crowley, tell me you can save the sand.
Grand Alderman, there are billions of grains of sigil sand in that pit, every one of which has absorbed some non-trivial amount of Emrys's miasma, Crowley replied, his booming, monotone voice trumpeting out of a gramophone horn attached beside his brain vat. Anything less than 100% successful purification would result in some taint remaining and inevitably spreading throughout the volume. If you command it, I could attempt to purge the sand, but I believe that failure would be the most likely outcome. While I realize it would be a costly loss, writing the sand off is most likely the most pragmatic choice of action. Why does no one ever listen to me? Crowley demanded as he looked out over the pit of corrupted sigil sand that he'd been charged with salvaging. I advised against summoning Emrys, and you summoned him anyway. Told the Grand Adamant that I was perfectly capable of being the permanent head of the Harrowig chapter, a position he handed over to Ivy Noir instead. And when she messes up, and we have multiple metric tons of miasma-saturated sigil sand under Pendragon Hill, does anyone so much as humor my recommendation that we just get rid of it?
For what it's worth, I'm with you this time, Crowley.
Seneca agreed as he raked the sigil sand smooth. If Artaxerxes was still with us, it'd be a different story. Even if we still had some of his descendants, it might be worth a try. But without a crow, I don't care much for our odds.
Have you considered asking Miss Sumner if she might be willing to lend us the services of her familiar?
Asked Woodbead, Seneca's valet and chief manservant, who was still somewhat out of breath from the exertion of pulling Crowley and his infernal contraption down the spiral set of stairs into the subterranean Kunikuli chamber.
There's no point.
Even if he wasn't a ghost, Elan was technically disowned by his father and was far less initiated in his bloodline secrets than most, Seneca explained.
Besides, I want Samantha to remain a neutral third party in our little feud with Emrys. Undoing his sabotage would quite firmly put her on our side.
I'm not going to take offense at your lack of confidence in my abilities, Raubritta remarked dryly. Artaxerxes' crow is dead and his bloodline erased from the earth. We are still alive, and we're all confident enough in our immortality. We felt no need to sire progeny to begin with. Is that not proof enough that our occult abilities surpass those of Crow and his heirs?
Artaxerxes made one mistake, selling his soul and the souls of his descendants to Persephone.
In all other aspects, his skill and knowledge of the occult were beyond sublime, Seneca insisted. We never would have defeated Morgana King or that maleficent, multitudinous minion of hers if it hadn't been for Crow. What are you going on about him having kids for? I can believe your lack of offspring was a coldly calculated decision to maximize your profits with no need to offset the risk of old age and death. I simply had no need and little tolerance for the second sex. As for Crowley, he was, to put this delicately,
impotent due to morbid obesity,
Crowley finished for him.
Seneca, please tell me you had this place ritualistically cleansed and thoroughly sanitized after the incident with the Gorgonian lions.
The last thing we need is alchemically active lizard offal interfering with the purification ritual.
Yes, Crowley.
Rest assured that all that necessary prep work has been seen to, Seneca said with a roll of his eyes. Can we please get on with this? Fail, and then head back to Adderwood so that the Grand Adamant can yell at us some more. Crowley's brain nodded up and down in its vat as his pedestal rotated to face the now smooth pit of sand.
Witch's salt is the preferred means to purify sigil sand, he remarked. All it takes is getting it to resonate at an inverse astral frequency to whatever's contaminating the sand, and it will dispel any unwanted energies. The problem here is that Emrys' miasma is extra-universal in origin, so it doesn't exactly play by the same set of rules. We do know that Emrys is vulnerable to chthonic forces, specifically those associated with Persephone, due to her role in forging his chains. I believe that any emanation of Emrys on our plane, including his miasma, should have the same vulnerability. I have brought 3 totems carved from Samhain consecrated chthonic salt, ensuring the fullest possible alignment to Persephone's aura. Woodbead, would you be so kind as to place them evenly around the inner circumference of the pit, making sure that they are partially embedded into the sand itself? Woodbead flipped open the small wooden chest that Crowley had them drag down for him, revealing 3 Corvine statues carved from faintly luminescent Stygian blue salt. Ah, it seems that there are some crows here with us after all, he quipped. Those are ravens, you ornithologically illiterate ignoramus, Crowley chastised him. As usual, this ritual takes 3 occult practitioners to complete the circuit. Ideally, it would be 3 riches,
But since Seneca remains obstinate that Miss Sumner and her coven do not aid us in this endeavor, then the three of us will do in a pinch. We each stand between one of the totems on the outer perimeter of the sandpit, with the sacrifice going in the middle. I beg your pardon, the what now? Woodbead asked as he finished placing the final totem. Not you, Seneca assured him. Raubritta, what did you bring? Raubritta reached into his jacket and pulled out something wrapped in fine linen. He carefully pulled it back to unveil a well-preserved human heart, one with a puncture wound piercing right through the middle. Dare I ask where you got that from? Woodbead queried, his face paling noticeably despite the poor light. You didn't buy it off the Darlings, did you? Their victims don't go peacefully, and that trauma has a significant impact on the applicability of their organs, Seneca insisted. It's Petra's, Raubritta said as he callously examined the unbeating heart. When Emrys resurrected her, he wasn't able to repair the damage that Mary had caused, so he took her to Uzargazin's to find her a mechatronic replacement. He rather carelessly left her original heart behind for Uzargazin to do with as he pleased. He alchemically preserved it, and my representatives were able to convince him to part with it as reparations for that adamant he dismembered. With a single casual toss, Raubritta threw the heart into the dead center of the sandpit, glad to get some practical use out of the notoriously impractical organ. Dear God, Seneca muttered, what makes you so confident it was mere carelessness on Emrys's part, That heart was removed after she was dead but before she was resurrected, so any somatic connection it may have had to Petra has been severed. Emrys knows the sort of things we do with ill-gotten organs, and he knew we'd likely be able to persuade Uzargazin to hand it over. This is a terrible idea. Emrys wants us to use this heart, mark my words. I'm in full agreement, but the Grand Adamant wants this sand purified, Crowley explained. Miasma has to go somewhere once we dispel it from the sand. Since it came from Petra in the first place, her old heart is the best vessel we have at our disposal. And did you tell the Grand Adamant it was Petra's heart you planned to use? Seneca demanded. I didn't not tell him, Crowley replied. I told him we'd use a suitable human heart as a vessel for the miasma, and he didn't ask me to expound on that. Now there's one final monkey wrench that we have to deal with, which is that the miasma is going to be highly resistant to any attempt to purify it. That's why, in addition to the ritual, I'm going to attempt some electrothermic ondulation to speed things along. His Tesla coil instantly whirred to life, discharging a semi-continuous bolt of lightning between the sand, the three totems, and the heart. Christ, Crowley, is that really necessary? What if you miss and hit one of us? Seneca demanded. Don't make me miss, and you'll be fine, Crowley assured him. Raubritta, since you're filling in for Crow, you take the lead. Just to clarify something before you begin, Woodbead interjected. The worst thing that can happen here is that it doesn't work, right? The three of them stared at him for a beat, before turning inwards and beginning the ritual. Ave thaumaturgica serpentis, ave ophion orbis ouroboros, cum sal maleficarum, hanc terram purgamus tenebrarum, cum fulmine Jupiter patris, damus lucem tenebris, cum hoc sacrificale sanguineo, vincimus tenebris, Raubritta chanted as he slowly traced sigils into the sand with the end of his cane. Hail the magic of the serpent. Hail Ophion, the world serpent. With witch's salt we purge this earth of darkness. With the Skyfather's lightning we give light to darkness. With this sacrificial blood we overcome the darkness. Ave thaumaturgica serpentis. Ave Ophion orbis ouroboros. Cum sal maleficarum. Hanc terram purgamus tenebrarum. Cum fulmine Jupiter patris, damus lucem tenebris. Cum hoc sacrificale sanguineo, vincimus tenebris.
Seneca and Crowley joined in with the chanting now, Seneca drawing sigils with his ceremonial serpentine saber, and Crowley drawing his with bolts from his Tesla coil. They repeated their chant over and over, and as they did, the totems of chthonic salt began to vibrate and glow. Their auras extended outwards from their outstretched wings, forming an enclosed perimeter that began to grow towards the center of the pit. As they encroached along the sand surface, the grains of sand began to glow and vibrate in synchronicity with the totems, and a black miasma began to exude from the surface. It mostly just crept and circulated along the pit's circumference, with Crowley using his electrothermic coil to shoot down any wisps that might venture too high or too far. When the light finally touched the heart, it was a catalyst for some kind of thaumaturgic or chain reaction. The heart began to beat, its rhythm resonating with the sands and causing them to beat both faster and harder. More and more of the miasma was heaved up, circling around the heart in a heavy vortex that occluded everything within it from sight. Only the totems themselves remained visible, and only then as vague points of light in the storm. Inevitably, when every iota of miasma had been expelled from the sand, it began to collect inward, the dark cloud shrinking as the ravenously beating heart gulped it down, making it as much a part of itself as its own sinew. When the last puff of miasma was swallowed, the sand felt still, the totems went dark, and the three chanting occultists fell silent. Panting in relief and astonishment, Woodbead stepped back from his hiding spot and whipped out his parathermometer to begin taking readings. "You did it. You did it," he proclaimed. "The sand's reading is completely neutral. I'm not picking up a single taint of Emrys's miasma. It worked, gentlemen." He looked up from his gauge, expecting the others to be excited, celebratory, or at least relieved. But instead they all continued staring at the sandpit in silent dread. "It shouldn't still be beating," Crowley said. In the center of the pit remained the heart, and it had not fallen still. The miasma had transmogrified it into gleaming obsidian, yet it somehow maintained a strong and steady beat as it rested upon the sand. The condensed miasma flowed rapidly in small loops, in and out of every vein and artery, seemingly quite content with its new home. Crowley glared at Seneca and Raubritter from within his bubbling vat, indicating that one of them should step forward to investigate. "It's your heart," Seneca muttered to Raubritter. "It's your pit," Raubritter muttered back. Before any decision could be reached, however, the heart began to sink beneath the sand, possibly burrowing of its own accord. Now there was no hesitation, Seneca and Raubritter each jumping forward and desperately sifting through the sand to catch the wayward heart. They dug frantically, soon reaching the bottom of the shallow pit, with no sign of the heart or where it had gone. The four of them all shared knowing, disquieted glances, each too terrified to bother placing blame for the moment. Seneca was the one who finally broke the awkward silence. "Well, like I said earlier, none of us were ever any good at chasing after women's hearts." Well, you know what? This has been a very bizarre collection of stories, hasn't it? Anyway, I hope it's been entertaining for you. As I said right at the start, I love this setting. It was so important to me. Such an idyllic part of my growing up and my youth, and had so many so wonderful experiences around the campfire. And I just wanted to really invite you into that setting and try and give you a bit of a feeling of what it was like for me as a youth. Drinking beers, telling stories, having fun. Any good? I hope so. Anyway, I've got another story for you right now. So, without further ado, let's keep going with this one.
What Sheila Wants by Corpse Child. I just wanted to make her happy, that's all. I just wanted to make her happy with me again. Was that so wrong? I mean, what did I do to deserve this? Okay, so maybe I cheated, but I felt horrible for it, and I wanted to make it up to her. God, what am I supposed to do? Sheila, if you're reading this, I'm sorry, okay? I'm fucking sorry, just please let me go. It was a couple of nights ago while at a party that I was going to town on Clarissa, the dirty little side piece that I'd mentioned before. I remember how dull it felt, and how I almost couldn't even finish. She hadn't come either, even after 12 straight minutes. Eventually I managed to make it work before I called it quits that night and headed home. To be perfectly honest, I was actually getting kind of sick of the old routine. Sneaking out just about every Friday night and running around with Clarissa at parties. It was fun for a while, yes. There, I fucking said it. But I didn't feel right anymore. We'd been doing it for over 3 months by then, and I guess I was finally growing a bit of a conscience near the end, you know. And of course I knew Sheila wasn't buying my lame-ass, got caught up at work late again stories anymore. Well, looking back, I wouldn't be surprised if she never believed that lie to begin with. Either way, I knew by the way she'd grown distant with me after about the 5th or 6th time that she was just about done with me. Make no mistake, I loved her. I still do. Always will. But I don't know, I guess I just needed a bit more. I know how fucked up that sounds, and believe me, whether or not I actually survive this, I know my place in hell is booked for that. Nevertheless, I love Sheila, and I hope that somewhere in her heart she can realize this. So anyway, yeah, that was the night I finally broke things off with Clarissa for good. I decided I needed to be a man and come clean with my wife. Even if she already knew, I knew it was going to continue eating away at me unless I got it out. The way I figured, she'd at least respect my apology a little more, finding it to be a bit more genuine if I just came out and freaking said it. And when I got home, I found her on the couch, the lights dim. "All right, Ted, you can do this. Just spit it out." Look, honey, I've been fooling around behind your back with another woman." Her face was stone-cold numb when I said this. The silence hung in the air for a solid moment. The two of us locked in a staring contest. I stood frozen, waiting for her to do or say something. I wasn't sure what I was expecting her to do or say, granted. I wasn't sure whether to duck and cover, bracing for her to grab the nearest blunt object and go full throttle on me, or scream like a banshee at me till her throat gave out. Would she cry? Maybe tell me she hated me and that I'd broken her heart. Maybe she'd retaliate by telling me she'd been fucking another guy as well. What was she going to do? Well, let me tell you exactly what she did. Nothing. No curses, no screaming, no tears. Nothing. She just continued to stare at me numbly, her lovely amber eyes boring straight through me, through my soul. I think this scared me more than any of the various other reactions could have. I wasn't expecting silence. Because of that, I didn't know what I was supposed to do or say. More than this, though, this hurt me because deep down her silence was more deafening than her screaming. She hated me. "Sheila, I love you. I'm so sorry." My voice began to crack as I said this. Tears started stinging my eyes. These were tears of complete shame and disgust with myself. Still, she just stood, staring. "Sheila, please, I'm sorry." Nothing. She made no movement. Motionless. Still. Numb. "Sheila?" I whimpered. "Please, baby, say something." Silence. My heart rate began spiking. "Please, say something, goddammit." I grabbed her shoulders and was about to shake her when I felt her hands slowly grab mine. Her hands were as gentle as they always were, yet somehow I could feel the malice emanating from them as she slowly and gently removed my hands from around her shoulders. "Don't," she said in a voice as monotone as an answering machine. Her face hadn't changed. She still stared straight through me. "Don't worry about it. I don't even care anymore." What? What are you... "I don't care, Ted. About your apology, your excuses, your affair. I don't care anymore. You couldn't come clean on the multiple times I gave you, so I gave up." Well, I was speechless. I scrambled to find something, anything to say. To tell her that she was wrong, that things would be different, having ditched Clarissa for good. But how could I? She was right, I'd had ample opportunities to fess up, and instead I continued to lie through my teeth to her face so I could keep doing it. Oh, Sheila, baby, I said I don't care anymore, and I mean it. She then turned and walked into our room. I followed after her. Wait, Sheila, I cried. Please, let me make it up to you. She didn't respond. I saw her begin zipping up her old suitcase with all of her clothes inside. What is this? I asked, despite knowing good and damn well what was going on. I can't be here anymore, Ted. This is a house of lies. I'm moving back in with my mother. My heart stopped. She zipped up the last suitcase and started toward the door when I stopped her. Oh, wait, please, give me one more chance, I begged. I've given you multiple chances. I'm done. End of story. She attempted to push past me then, but I stayed firm, blocking the doorway. Please, don't go. I'll do anything. Just please, don't go. She looked into my eyes again, letting go of the suitcases. I had her attention. Anything? She asked, her voice remaining as dead as before. Anything you want, I promise. Whatever you want from me, or what you want me to do, baby, it's yours. She just stood for a solid minute, squinting, her eyes piercing into me, like she was weighing the sincerity of my statement with her eyes. Her blank face returned, and she said, turning and climbing into bed, We'll see. I'm tired, but I can't sleep with a cheating bastard like you lying next to me. Yeah, of course, I said, trying to hold in my breath of relief. I still had a chance to fix what's been broken. I'll sleep on the couch as long as... Oh no, she piped up. I don't want you in this house with me tonight. I swallowed hard. Yeah, of course, hon, I said reluctantly. I then turned and left the room. I walked out and decided to camp in the car for the night. My car's a small 2006 Altima, which meant that trying to get comfortable in it was a friggin' nightmare in itself. What was worse was that being in the middle of summertime and all, it felt like it was 95 degrees or better, despite it being nighttime. Well, I couldn't turn on the AC either, or I ended up risking running down the battery. Well, it was unpleasant, sure, but if it was what she wanted, well, I didn't get much sleep that night. The sun took its sweet time coming back up, too, which didn't help. Nevertheless, I managed to power through and catch maybe 45 minutes to an hour's worth of sleep before 6 a.m. rolled around, bringing the first hints of dawn. Part of me was relieved. I thought, maybe she'd at least let me back in the house now, right? How fucking naive. No, instead, when I got out of the car and tried to go inside, the door was locked. My key wasn't working either. Somehow it was like something was lodged in the keyhole on the other side. I stood there jerking on the handle like a maniac for about another minute when my phone buzzed. I looked to see that it was a text from Sheila. Don't even think about it. I don't want you in the same house as me. My eyes went wide. I looked up to our bedroom window to see Sheila standing there staring down at me. I started typing back. Okay, but I'd like to talk to you about this. She began typing again. I'm not ready to talk just yet. I'm not sure what I want from you yet, if anything. My heart sank again, reading those last two words. If anything. Those two words stung me more than I ever thought they could. Desperately, I started typing back. I understand. Just let me know when you're ready to talk. Like I said, I'll do anything you want. I just want to start over. I love you. A minute later, my phone buzzed again with a reply. We'll see. That was the last thing that was said before she drew the curtains and walked away from the window. I sighed. Part of me wanted to cry. I really wanted to make things work here. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Just calm down, Ted. Let her think it over. With that, I decided to get back in my car and drive around to look for a place to stay until Sheila was ready to talk again. Or at least let me in the house again, whichever came first, I suppose. I decided to get a room at the hotel just a few streets down. Wasn't cheap, but I guess that was really only a small price to pay in the end, given what I'd done. Hell, it's a hell of a lot smaller price to pay than the situation I'm in now. God damn it, Sheila, I'm sorry. It was that night that I got a text from her.
Did you mean what you said?
Well, my heart was instantly set racing.
Yes, of course. I love you. I've always loved you, I promise. I meant it too when I say that it eats me inside knowing that I've hurt you. I meant about you saying you'd do whatever I wanted. Do you mean that?
I paused for a moment. I wasn't sure how to proceed. I mean, of course I wanted to immediately shoot back with, yes dear, anything. But for whatever reason, something, I don't know, just some feeling, told me something was just off somehow.
Do you, Ted?
This jolted my focus again, and I began typing.
Yes, Sheila. I meant that. I love you, and I want to make things work. Can we talk about this in person?
She didn't respond after this, though. And that night was spent with me pacing the hotel room, constantly checking my phone, despite my ringer being on. My head and heart both felt like they were in a race with one another, seeing which one could make me go dizzy first, and how rapidly they both spun in a chaotic spiral.
Why wouldn't she answer? What was she talking about? Did I mean it? What was she planning? What does she want from me?
Well, that, I think, was probably what tore me up the most. Just like before, I wasn't sure what to expect from her here. We'd been married for almost 2 years, and never had I seen her like this, so cold and bitter. Yeah, I get it, I fucked up, but that just made this all the more confusing to me, especially with the way she was asking if I'd do anything. What was she trying to do here? Even cycling through every conceivable possibility, I couldn't settle on any definitive answer to that question. Obviously, because of this, the idea of trying to sleep that night was a pipe dream in itself. I stayed glued to my phone all through the night, anticipating a text or something from Sheila, but nothing came. It wasn't until that morning that I was abruptly jolted to attention by the buzz of a text message. In one fluid motion, I swiped my phone to see what it was. It was a message from Clarissa. Hey, so I thought you didn't want to see me anymore. Already my mind was quickly overloading with all new questions, on top of the already damn near innumerable present, about why, of all people, Clarissa was hitting me up. I texted back that I didn't, that we were done, before asking her why she still had my number. Well then, why does it say in your Facebook that you're planning on a date with me to the drive-in theater in an hour? Well, now I was thrown. I was about to call her bullshit, telling her to cut it out with whatever game she was trying to play with me here and lose my number, when she shot back with a screen cap of a Facebook post. It was a post from me, from my profile, that had her tagged reading, "Can't wait to see you there, baby doll." Beside this was a flirt and a kissy face. Well, I was frozen. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I actually had to go into my Facebook myself just to see if this was real. Sure as hell it was, but how? Up until right then, I'd not even fucking been on Facebook. Hadn't even glimpsed it, far less posted. Yet there it was, posted to my feed only about 2 hours before.
I didn't post that.
Sure you didn't. Just like you didn't want to have me no more. She followed this with a wink emoji and a kiss.
Damn it, look, I'm serious. I don't know what's going on here, but I didn't write that. I don't want to see you anymore. I want to be with my wife. Now, lose my number and don't text or call me again.
She responded with a flirty face.
Okay, Tiger, I get it.
Playing hard to get her. Well, we'll see about that. Well, I was about to block her number when something odd struck me about the last message.
We'll see about that.
I wasn't sure at that moment why, but it sounded ominous to me in a way.
See about what?
Well, she didn't answer that, though. I looked again at the Facebook post.
That can't be right, I thought. Something's up, I know it.
Well, exactly what that something was, though, at the time was, of course, just as good a guess as anyone else. All I knew was that nothing made sense here. Why was Clarissa thinking I wanted to go on a date with her to the old drive-in after I'd made it brutally clear to her that I was done fooling around on my wife with her? Then I realized something else. Why there? That old spot doesn't even have the drive-in anymore. It's just a vacant lot with only the old equipment shed at the back behind where the screen used to be, having sat long abandoned for a couple of years now. Why would she think I wanted to take her there? My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Sheila. Come by the house in 2 hours. I thought about it, and I think I'm ready to talk to you about this. Well, I wanted to jump, both out of joy but also out of my skin in fear. What was I supposed to tell her about my date with Clarissa? I mean, sure, I didn't make that post, but what good was that going to be? She wouldn't believe that. I know that's my own damn fault for having lied to her so many times before, but damn it, I was over that now. I was over Clarissa. Well, maybe she doesn't know. I closed my eyes. Just calm down, calm down. She wants to give you one last shot. I took a deep breath then. Just keep your head down, give her what she wants, and forget Clarissa. And with that, I got dressed and headed out. I stopped by the flower shop and grabbed a bouquet of flowers, specifically requesting carnations and roses, her favorites. When I got to the house about 20 minutes early, I shot her a text that I was outside waiting. 2 seconds later, the phone buzzed. 1 minute. No problem. Take your time, hon. Only another minute or so later, I saw the front door to the house open. Sheila stepped out onto the front porch, looking absolutely drop-dead fucking beautiful. I'm talking she looked like she did when she was 18 in senior year of high school when we first met. Tight blue tank top, skinny jeans, but no makeup. She never needed any. Not back then, and sure as hell not now. She looked at me, smiling. My heart started cutting backflips in my chest. Hope wasn't lost. There was still a chance. I could save my marriage. You look beautiful, honey, I said, excited. She giggled. I went to try and put my arm around her, but stopped when she recoiled away from me. For a second, her smile fell and was replaced with one of disapproval. I retracted. We still weren't at hugging level yet. I held my hand up and lowered my head. Yeah, my bad. Forgiven. Now, let's go. I've got the perfect place in mind. Where? Her look of disapproval returned. That's not for you to worry your head about. You just drive, and I'll lead the way. I just bowed my head, conceding, before turning the engine over and backing out of the driveway. She told me to back out from the right and headed towards the road leading downtown. We began heading downtown in relative silence, broken only whenever Sheila gave me another direction to turn. Not that I didn't want to talk. Far from it. At the same time, though, something gave me the impression the feeling wouldn't be reciprocated by her. Turn here and stop, she said, pointing to the right turn branching off from the main part of the downtown area. I did so, leading us to where else but the empty lot where the old drive-in theater used to be. Well, I was confused, obviously, but even more than this, I was nervous. It didn't help either that Clarissa's Honda was parked out front. What the hell? What's she doing here? I could feel sweat forming in bullets on my forehead and dropping like rain. My heart was through the roof. What was I going to do? What's Sheila going to say when Clarissa sees me and tries to get all lovey-dovey with me? Why does Sheila want to come here? I turned to her, trying not to make it look so obvious that something didn't feel right to me. I didn't want her to lose her patience, and plus I was banking on her not having seen the mysterious Facebook post that I didn't create in the first place. I needed this to work with me and Sheila, and this would have fucked things up every which way from Sunday. She looked back at me, smiling. I noticed she looked like whatever was going on and whatever she'd planned was, well, she was genuinely excited about it, and this only further confused me. What could she be so excited about? There was literally nothing there, just the old abandoned shed. Still smiling, she turned and started getting out of the car. Come on, Follow me. Hey, wait, I said, gently placing my hand on her shoulder. She stopped, turning back to me. What's going on? How come you wanted to come here? There's nothing around. Just trust me and follow. I stayed seated, unmoving. I didn't feel right getting out of the car. Something just felt off. Way off. Her smile started to fall once again. You said anything, remember? That made me sigh and relent. I unbuckled my seatbelt and got out to follow her towards the shed. About halfway there, I watched her pull what looked to be a blindfold out of her purse. I stopped walking. Babe, what's that for? She turned and smiled slyly at me, adding an equally sly wink. It was the same one she used to use in the past whenever we decided to spice things up in the bedroom. What do you think? We haven't had any real fun in a while. She walked up and ran her hands gently up my chest. If we're going to start over, teddy bear, why not go wild with it? Despite how nice it felt for her to be touching me again like this, I still couldn't shake the feeling something wasn't right here. Okay, I replied, chuckling nervously. But why here in the middle of nowhere? How come we couldn't have just done this at home? You know, in our bed. She sighed. First, until you make things up to me, that bed isn't ours. And second, why not here? Don't you remember? That Friday night, last day of senior year? This is where we first did it. That actually hit me hard for a moment. She was right, this was our first spot, and I'd actually forgotten. I couldn't help but feel like an even bigger jackass than I already no doubt was. You're right, I said guiltily. She rose and gave me a quick yet sensuous peck on the cheek before leaning into my ear and whispering in a smooth, balmy whisper. I know. Trust me, Teddy. I'll always know more than you'll ever think I do. I've always known how naughty you'd been, and I know how to teach you to never do it again. She then followed this by playfully biting my earlobe. Admittedly, this did start to excite me a bit. I'd forgotten how good she was at that. Clarissa never played like that. I still didn't shake the queasy feeling in the pit of my stomach, though. She then handed me the blindfold and told me to put it on. I obeyed, and she took me by the hand and led me the rest of the way to the shed. I couldn't see anything, but I eventually heard the large metal door of the shed loudly creaking open. I felt Sheila let go of my hand and say, Okay, now take the blindfold off. I did, and what I saw next was enough to make my heart stop dead in my chest. In front of me, illuminated by the light from the open doorway, was Clarissa tied to a chair in the middle of the room with cuts, gashes, and bruises covering nearly every square inch of her face. She looked up at me, her eyes glazed and pitiful, pathetic. What the fuck? I exclaimed, frozen in shock. My shock was broken, however, when I felt something clock me over the back of my head. I was instantly knocked out cold. I awoke, don't even bother asking me how much later, to having frigid ice-cold water thrown in my face. My head was swimming, throbbing, and aching worse than any migraine I'd ever had before. I saw that I was tied to a chair now, too. In front of me, Clarissa stood, stripped down to her bra and underwear, clutching a knife in one hand. Behind her was Sheila, staring at me with that same cold expression she wore when I told her that night about the affair. I groaned weakly. What the fuck? Sheila stepped forward. This is how you're going to make it up to me, Ted. You like playing rough, and you love fucking around with her so much. Well, here you go. Now you'll play as rough as you want. Clarissa took a step forward, raising up the knife. Her eyes were also wide and afraid. I started squirming against my restraints. What the fuck are you doing, Sheila? Look, just let us go. She walked up and delivered a sharp smack across my left cheek that stung. I'm giving you what you deserve, asshole. You wanted to fool around behind my back with this bitch and then lie to my fucking face every time about it? And I just let it go, didn't I? I didn't answer at first, instead trying fruitlessly to wriggle out of the ropes. She smacked me across the face again, harder this time. Didn't I? Yes, I shouted, groaning in pain. I let you have your little fun and rip my fucking heart in half. Well, now I'm gonna get what I want. Have some of my fun. She grinned slyly again. This time, though, it looked a lot less seductive and a hell of a lot more psychotic. She then stroked my cheek and said, I want to see just how much you really love me. Tell me, teddy bear, did you mean it when you said anything? I looked at her, silently pleading like a fucking dog for her to stop all of this and let me and Clarissa go. I could see in her eyes, though, that she was enjoying every second of seeing me like that, completely at her mercy. The devious way in which her smile grew confirmed this. Yes, I muttered. She cupped her hand to her ear, teasing like she didn't hear me. Yes, okay, I said. Look, I love you, Sheila, and yes, I'll do anything you want, okay? Let's just go home, please. She giggled and looked over to Clarissa, who stood holding the knife, frightened. Prove it. I want you to kill her for me. My blood froze. No, Sheila, I can't kill her. So you were lying? No, but Sheila, this is insane. Look, I'm sorry, okay, I am. I'm sorry for being a piece of shit. You deserve better, but damn it, I'm not killing Clarissa. Her smile vanished, and she untied the ropes holding me. Before I could try and make a run for the door, however, I felt Sheila crack a metal rod over my kneecap, instantly breaking my leg and causing me to fall to the ground, writhing in agony. She bent down to me and whispered, Then you can do it for yourself, since that's the only person you really care about. You want out? You want to live? Kill her and send me a pic of the body. Oh, and try being cute and calling the cops, and I'll make damn sure they never find you. She held up her phone, turning on a live feed of the inside of the shed, and said, And like I told you, I'll know if you're being naughty. She then thrust my phone into my chest before turning and walking out. I'll be waiting, sweetheart, she said as she closed the giant metal door, locking the two of us inside. Clarissa stood quivering. I continued writhing on the ground, groaning and clutching my leg. Suddenly, Clarissa started walking towards me, knife in hand. I couldn't move. I was defenseless, completely at her mercy. She came right on top of me. I closed my eyes, thinking, this was it. I was screwed. I opened my eyes to see that she dropped the knife. She then crumpled to the ground and started crying softly. What are we going to do? I don't know. The door's locked. We can't call for help. I winced and yelped in pain. Pain was shooting from my leg all through my body. Clarissa knelt over me. Here, she said sniffling. Let me see your leg. Then she gently rolled up my pant leg. My kneecap was shown to be completely broken, protruding against my skin at an unnatural angle. Oh my God, are you okay? I didn't pay attention to her. Instead, my eyes were focused on the knife lying on the ground just less than a foot away from me. She began frantically looking around the room. There's got to be a key around here somewhere. Hang on. She got up and started pacing around, looking in every corner for a key. A key that I knew wasn't in there. There was only one key to get out. Hey, come here, I said, groaning. She didn't hear me at first. While she still wasn't looking, I reached out and grabbed the knife. Hey, Clarissa, I found it. I found the key. You did? Yeah, just come over here and get it so that you can unlock the door. I can't get up. She stopped and ran over to me. She bent down and started looking around. Where is it? She got no further. The next and last thing I'd hear out of Clarissa were the sounds of her choking and gasping desperately for air. Her eyes bugged out at me. Looking in her eyes, I could see two emotions mixing into one: betrayal and horror. Oh, I'm sorry. Soon she stopped gasping and collapsed, lifeless. I couldn't help but scream out in anguish at this. I couldn't believe what I'd just done. I just killed somebody. Not just that, but somebody that, even though they'd helped in destroying my marriage, I still actually cared about. The worst part was, like Sheila said, it was just my own selfish gain. But what else was I supposed to do? I said I'd do anything. I'm afraid, though, that it may have been for nothing. Not knowing what else to do, I snapped a picture of Clarissa and sent it to Sheila, but she didn't reply. This was 3 days ago, and I'm still trapped in here with no way out and unable to even move or call for help. All of this, and I still haven't heard a single fucking word from her. I'm scared. I'm gonna fucking die in here, aren't I? You seeing this, Sheila? Are you happy now? Can I please be let out? I'm sorry, goddammit. God, anybody, I'll do whatever you want. Just let me out.
So yeah, that was a format I used to do quite a lot back in the early days of the channel. God, it's been going a long time now, hasn't it? Yeah, back in 2016, 17, 18. And I really missed it, to be honest. I do love this, and it brings back such good memories. Even though, it's not a real campfire we're sitting around, I do enjoy spending the time with you, telling these stories, and I hope it's a good experience for you as well. Anyway, thoughts, feelings, anything else you want to say in the comment section below. And as ever, I'll do my best to join in the conversation. Well, that is it for your Friday evening's entertainment. Got loads of stuff lined up, really exciting stuff. Glad you like that pizza delivery story series. That's coming back on Sunday for the next few episodes. Screwball, comedy horror. I'm enjoying it anyway. I know a few of you are, so there'll be more of that on a Sunday. And back again on Monday with something else as well. Till then, my dear friends, I really hope you have a lovely weekend. And I'll see you all again very soon. Okay? Till then, bye-bye.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.